7:24. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Chapman?
Here.
Fahey? Kimball?
Here.
Mullins?
Here.
Newberg?
Here.
Master? Wilson?
Here.
Right, before we get started, just a couple of administrative matters. First of all, you've all looked with alarm at the lengthy agenda for this evening. It is long. Dr. Lovett and I last week made arrangements to the agenda to move time-sensitive items and/or items where we knew we'd have interested members of the public or staff here towards the front of the agenda. Non-time-sensitive items or items for which we did not expect to have anybody here towards the bottom. We do not have to necessarily get through all these agenda items tonight, and if that's the will of the board, we won't. We'll pass them over till January. Since this is a longer meeting as well, I did bring fresh fruit, apples, bananas, and a variety of granola and trail mix bars for those of us who are sentenced to be here for the entire meeting, which would include cabinets and the board. The food is on the back table, so feel free. We probably will have a short recess in the middle of this meeting to allow individuals to use the facilities and get anything to eat. We don't want to be chopping away during the meeting. Gray would be very upset with me if I did that. So, all right. Saying that, we'll move to discussion item B1, which is our routine update on school board superintendent goals and strategic plan priorities. Dr. Lovett just asked me to make one note here. We've had one item moved from red to yellow on the strategic plan, and that is the item of community engagement. And that is because we are going to be setting up listening sessions as part of our superintendent search, and we view that as a positive step towards getting the community directly engaged in the operations of the school board. Any questions about this agenda item? Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, just a point of order, Janet. Do we need an approval of the agenda?
No. No,
Okay.
we don't on this one, on the
All
work
right.
study.
Yeah.
Any other comments about B1? Well, let's hope the rest goes quickly. We'll turn to B1A, and that is Goal 4C, Review of Mental Health, Chemical Health Recommendations and Timelines. Dr. Lovett, Ms. Daniels.
Madam Chair, Kathleen Daniels and Eva Fink will take front and center, and we'd like to invite the other members of the committee who are here to come up as well. So please join us. In the last nearly year and a half, Kathleen Daniels and Eva Fink have co-chaired a committee that grew out of conversations that we had around this table, listening sessions from our schools, and the results of the 2013 Minnesota Student Health Survey. And we took the initiative to address issues that a lot of folks weren't addressing, issues of mental health and chemical dependency, the issues especially around what we should be doing to support our students and staff. So, Avis, Kathleen, perhaps you'd like to begin by introducing who else is with you this evening and then proceeding with your presentation.
Chair Newberg, members of the school board, Dr. Lovett, colleagues, thank you for having us tonight. I would like to take time to introduce all of our members of our committee. We have a larger committee. This is just some of the members. So we have, to my right, I'll go from right to left, Mary Sue Hansen from the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative, Janine Kimmel, middle school counselor at Sunrise Park. We have Peggy Hewitt Hansen from the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative, Erica Kelly Kennedy, a psychologist at Birch Lake Elementary School, Gretchen Harriman, principal at ALC and Insight, Brian Morris, our data man from Teaching and Learning, and Sarah Paul, our assistant superintendent. And to my left is Avis Fink. Avis is the lead coordinator and our out-of-district placement coordinator and a lead social work coordinator, and our homeless liaison. And I'm Kathleen. So thank you for letting us speak tonight. Tonight we're going to hopefully summarize quickly, our mental and chemical health review findings. And we tried to summarize them, I think, in 9 short pages, which really we have a very large 3-ring binder with everything that you ever really want to know locally about mental health. But we're going to try to make sense of what we reviewed to you tonight. So Avis and I are going to take turns with the slides, and then we'll give you an opportunity after that to ask us some questions that you have after we present.
Okay. As you can see, mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors such as brain chemistry and life experiences such as abuse and trauma. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from early childhood to late adulthood. Okay.
Sorry. Our next slide is illustrates how mental health is linked to academic success. And if you look at our circular diagram, you can see that academic outcomes are at the top, but everything leads to that. And we should start perhaps with the left-hand sort of orange arrow there, because we know that students that come to us with mental health, suffer from mental health issues such as anxiety or anger or depression, or something traumatic has happened to them in their life, are not going to be ready to learn and engaged in the classroom despite the best efforts of our educators. And we know we have many talented educators who provide and prepare beautiful lessons, but when we have students coming in who are dealing with mental health issues, we know it changes the brain and prevents them from being engaged in learning and being engaged in those behaviors that are educational behaviors such as engagement and attention span and even attending school and interacting appropriately with both staff and students. So we know that we have to build those skills and address those skills before we can get to those positive academic outcomes that we all desire for our students. And just like the teachers, the students don't hang up, like they hang up their coat, they don't hang up their mental health at the door and come in. They come in with who they are and what they've experienced, so we have to deal with the whole child.
The next 5 slides represent the committee's top 5 recommendations, and they're not really in any particular order. So the first recommendation that the committee came up with was just increasing staff development opportunities for all staff in the area of mental health and chemical health. And currently, we've had Dr. Clayton Cook come out from the University of Minnesota and do a presentation in September and November on trauma-informed practices and relationship building. We've had a couple Prairie Care therapists come out and do presentations. In May, Laura Matz came out and did a presentation on building and sustaining resiliency in our students, as well as Jessica Wonka just came out here in November and did a training on mindfulness and self-care. We're also looking at utilizing our chemical health staff to get out into our buildings to help train other staff on how to do some prevention and intervention related to chemical health. And then our community partners, so we do have the DHS grant, the Department of Human Services grant that allows for schooling's mental health partnerships. We have 10 schools that receive that grant. Nautilus, Northeast Youth and Family Services, and Sioux Familia are 3 of our providers, and they're all more than willing to come out and work with our staff and do some training and consult on specific mental health issues. And they also have offered to do some culturally specific conversations around mental health to increase that cultural competency related to mental health issues. And then we're also working on, yes.
From the facade, it would look as though this is really concentrated on the Insight program. Is that accurate, or is there a breakdown where certain segments of the district would receive more of these services?
This is so
an equal
initiative
across all the buildings?
Yep. So all staff went to the training with Dr. Cook. So this is reaching all staff. It's not specific to just the Insight program. And I think for the chemical health, it's going out to like North, South Campus, Sunrise, Central, and really working on training staff on just chemical health awareness and strategies for prevention and intervention. And then making these trainings available to all staff so that it's district-wide, not just for Insight. The Make It Okay campaign is a partnership between Health Partners and our Wellness Committee, and so we've done some training to kind of destigmatize mental health and make it okay for staff to have conversations about their own mental health and wellness, as well as help-seeking behaviors.
And just to add on to that, we know that our staff, it was very clear to us in the study that our staff's mental health also impacts their ability to reach students. And so we know that they themselves have to be taking care of themselves. And as educators, those of you that are educators know that just some of us like to put that at the bottom of the list and take care of a lot of other people first. So we're encouraging our staff to take care of themselves. So they have a right to wellness too. So we want to encourage them to seek help when they need it and support. The second recommendation, again in no particular order, is increasing opportunities for parents and community members to learn about mental health and chemical health issues in our own community and the signs and prevention, and then what's available in our community for them to get more information and how the schools can help them make those connections. So again, the Make It Okay campaign, in which Avis just talked about. And then also we received a grant just this fall to do some training for parents, and we're having one tomorrow night and one in about 2 weeks on anxiety with students, one adolescents, that's tomorrow night right here at Central, and the next one is in a couple weeks, and that's for younger children, and anxiety and how to recognize the signs and what to do about that. And again, we are in close collaboration with NAMI. They offer so many parent trainings in our community and surrounding communities, and we advertise that through our Bare Essentials and through the community e-newsletter, and we send out flyers through our counselors who then will give them directly to families. And I know from one of the parent educators, she was really enthused because she said that she did one, and more than half of the people that came to it were parents from White Bear Lake. And this is for communities in the northeast suburban area. So we know we're reaching our families, and we know that they know that these things are there, but we still need to be relentless in terms of getting information to them, because we have to collaborate with all of our community resources, because schools cannot have this burden alone, and we know that, and we know that it's a shared responsibility with the county, with community organizations. So connecting those families with those community organizations are really important. We had Parent Safety Night in November, and that was the biggest turnout ever, and we had 2 presentations from NAMI that night, and it was on suicide prevention, and we had 22 parents trained in QPR, question, persuade, and refer. It's like CPR, only it's a little bit different, and it's really for those first responders and talking to students or people who are suffering and thinking about suicide, or to get them to talk about it. So that was really exciting for us that we had so many parents come. And then we're going to make available, we have some resource guides both from Ramsey County and Washington County that we have in our possession now that we're just going to make available on our website, and we're going to get, I know because we haven't really been able to get a hold of that one yet, but we want to make them available to our families so they can just be a link to our website, and that's going to be happening soon. And then we're going to continue our work with ISSE and our parent engagement, because we know how successful that was last year. We know that we must, again, be relentless reaching out to those families that don't feel engaged in our schools and don't feel comfortable making that phone call to a counselor, to a teacher, to anyone for help. So we must bring them in to make them feel more comfortable, and also to be really reach across race, culture, age, social, economic barriers to help those families also.
With slide 3, I think something that came up the other day for me as I was talking with the staff, and she's like, I've been in this district for several years, and I still am really uncertain about what resources are available to our families and students in need. And I think part of that is sometimes resources, the funding changes, who they serve might change sometimes. So the main goal with our recommendation with number 3 is really to continue to find ways to build awareness amongst our staff of what resources are available to our community and how to access those resources. And some ideas that we've come up with as a committee is just developing an online resource guide that's specific to our community that our staff can access, that has the referral forms, and that we can continuously update to keep staff informed of some current resources that are available so that they're not always trying to search for those resources. Putting the online resource guides for the county, the Washington, Ramsey, and Anoka counties, and then continuing to do our resource fair. We do that every other year, and where we invite community partners in, and then staff and community members can come in and meet different resource providers, whether they're basic need providers or mental health providers. People can have then conversations with those individuals. And then just also continually reviewing what our current supports are and any changes, and updating through emails, through different department meetings and that, so.
And just a comment about that, when we presented to the staff and we sent out a survey, it was surprising that we have resources, but they're not all known to all staff. So our counselors, our psychs, our social workers are familiar with some of our resources, but beyond that, some of our staff members in the classroom and other people in the building are not. So we want to make sure that the things that we have in place are well known and easily accessed by our staff. So our fourth recommendation is just to expand opportunities for staff to connect and build relationships with students during the school day. Believe it or not, I know that it seems like we have a lot of time during the school day, and why wouldn't it be just so easy to build personal relationships with 150 kids if you're a secondary teacher, or more than that, or with your kids in your elementary, which I think is a little bit easier because you're with them all day, every day. But it's still staff is telling us that it's hard for them to carve out the time to make those personal connections sometimes when they're trying to really get through a curriculum, and they're so they're very dedicated to their subject matter and want to cover everything, but yet they have to make some time or find time, even in home base or advisory. And even home base and advisory now has become sort of a time where sometimes there's curriculum and things that we have to present, where teachers have to present. It becomes kind of administrative. You have to pass out this, you have to take account on this, you have to do this, or you have to cover this curriculum, or you have to do this. And so where's that time where it's just like, how was your weekend and what did you do? And some of those things that the staff is telling us, where are we going to find that time? So I think as a administration and all of us need to have those conversations with staff, and where can we carve out those time, because we know the most effective way to be impactful to all students' health conditions, whether it's mental health or physical health, is to have that personal relationship, and it costs us $0. So it is really free, but it takes time, and it takes almost permission from admin or us to say, what can we abandon? What is it that where can we find that time? What is a good thing that how could we carve out that time? And it's a challenge. It's a big challenge because there's so many things that are so important for all of our students. So it's just a continued conversation with building level admin and because there's really nothing that's not important. But we want to acknowledge that that was something we heard loud and clear from our staff, not only in the committee, but we heard it when we went out to the listening sessions too. So.
And the final recommendation was to increase support district-wide around mental health. And one of the conversations of the committee was the idea of adding a district coordinator to be responsible for guiding and monitoring the district-wide chemical and mental health needs, where their primary focus would be to bring staff together for mental health discussions and kind of planning these interdisciplinary team meetings, and where we could connect with different community resources so that we can continue to build capacity with our community partners, whether that's different mental health agencies, law enforcement, faith communities, various nonprofits. And then also to increase social work time that might be funded outside of special education. Currently, most of our social workers are funded within special education, which limits students who they can service. So looking at how we might be able to eventually expand our social work services to reach more students and families.
And then our last slide before we get to the questions is just kind of an illustration on how we think about the multi-tiered systems of support like we do for academics. And you've seen this, I know you've seen this triangle over the last 5 or 6 years many, many times, but it's really the same sort of idea that we have Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 services for students who have social, emotional, behavior, and mental health issues in the schools, and that we have our Tier 1 system that's solidly in place to really help the majority of our students, and Tier 2 where students get services perhaps from a psychologist, a behavior interventionist, maybe a social worker in small groups for all kinds of things, maybe check in, check out with somebody every day, and that would be maybe 15 to 20% of the students. And then at that top tier, Tier 3, those are the kids that we really might be referring to a setting for educational placement for EBD. Their parents or their physicians might be referring them to a care and treatment. These are kids that are going to need support for a long time, and lots of it, and from not just the schools but from community agencies. So that system of tiered intervention for mental health is just as important as the ones you've seen for academic, for reading and for math, that most of our kids will respond to what's in the classroom and what people get in general, that everyone gets, but then there's going to be that 25% that needs something extra. So that's our last slide, and then we'd like to open it up for questions from the group or for Avis and I.
Or either Ms. Daniels, Ms. Fink, or any of the group up there. Ms. Fahey.
I do have a comment, and Kathleen, this goes to what you were talking about, advisory, because having had advisory, it kind of became the catch-all. We have to do this, we have to do this, so we'll put it in advisory, and it became like another class. And another thing that I saw, like when I was at Sunrise, is, and this is difficult, but needs to be looked at also in terms of, we do have traveling teachers, and sometimes there would be a teacher that would come to Sunrise to take maybe one class, and they'd be given an advisory. And then those kids would not see that person in the building. Originally, we had in our, what was called our home base, was kids that we actually taught. But now you have kids that you don't actually teach, but at least you're in the building, they know where you are, and you can build those relationships. But in terms of traveling teachers, just with the, the restrictions on them with traveling, in terms of having them take an advisory too would be good to look at, because you need those people in the building that the kids can go to it anytime, see in the morning, see it, say goodbye to them at the end of the day.
Discussion piece for, I think, principals meeting and, really get to think about how to strategize about that, because I think you're right. I think they look for that person during the day. I think kids do. They look for their advisor or their home-based teacher.
Kathleen, can I just add one other thing? Just as a note, at Sunrise this year, because we identified that, this year our administration spent hours and hours, and they have really made it so that probably 90% of our kids have an advisory teacher that they have as a teacher. And so we completely acknowledge that same thing, and kids start to lose their connection with their advisory teacher. So our admin really went above and beyond to hand schedule kids in classes with the teacher that they had. And it's been amazing. It's been really good. Time-consuming to schedule, but a wonderful addition.
Great.
Yes, Ms. Newmaster.
I would just kind of add to what Ellen said, and I had advisory up at North Campus. And again, there was such a curriculum that kept it so busy. You had something every single advisory period that you were supposed to be doing. And then you were also supposed to check in on how well your kids were doing academically. So there wasn't a lot of time to develop that kind of relationship that's core to the kids feeling like they can come and tell you things. But as a media person, I also had an interesting view on kids who need a safe place, who go somewhere other than the big group places. And there's a lot of those kids that eat lunch in the media center. And they just need a break from the chaos sometimes, and sometimes it's a safe place. So I mean, there's all those kids out there, and unless you get to know them, you don't know who they are. But once you do, you know, they need a place. Somehow get the time for that.
Mr. Mullen?
I just have a comment. I just want to thank you all for your work. I mean, it's extremely important. I want to thank our partners in the room. I mean, those relationships are really important to what our students need. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Anyone else?
One thing I forgot to mention is that Lyle, he also helped plan and participated mightily in all of the discussions, and he wasn't able to be here. He had a family commitment, so he was part of our small group tonight and then had to, but he, as well as Mary Sue and Peggy, helped plan, really plan how we were going to go about getting our arms around all of this information, and so I just have to say, appreciated his input.
Miles, a legend. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Mr. Kimball.
First, I was just wondering if our student liaison had any thoughts on this topic.
I was actually kind of thinking about it. I think, like for me, I have teachers who I'm really close with, and like I create those bonds, but that's not always my advisory teacher. And I think, I don't know, I just think all teachers should like address mental health in the classroom, because each student has a different relationship with each teacher. Like I like my advisory teacher as a teacher, but I would never tell her about my problems. I mean, I'm okay, but you know what I mean? And so, I don't know, I don't always agree with the advisory thing, because it's so short. I barely know the kids in my advisory. I don't even know my teacher really. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable going to that teacher after school, but I don't know.
That's a really good point. We talked a lot about that. It's not always the person that you think that the student's going to connect with. It could be somebody, not even a teacher in the building, somebody else that's just working with that student who is connected with that student. It doesn't have to be their advisory person. It doesn't have to be a licensed teacher. It could be somebody that's supervising in the hallway. It could be somebody doing a completely different role in the office. It could be the school nurse. It could be lots of different people in the building. But the important thing, really, to your point, is that you have a connection and that you have somebody that you feel connected to. And it's great that you pointed that out, because you're right, it isn't always the advisory person, and we know that, but it's also kind of came to our attention through several discussions. But that was a great point. Great point.
I was wondering, I was talking, it seemed like last year, to the Anoka Hennepin superintendent, and he was very excited about a grant, some sort of a program through Alina, that they had received a huge grant, and I found a little bit about it. That's good. It was $370,000, so it might be huge or might not be huge. But it was to provide funds and resources to do a larger, deeper screening of high school students in areas of mental health, and then something called social determinants of health issues, and then provide them with all this follow-up. So I guess my question is, there's never enough resources for what you want to do. What's missing? What do we wish we had? Or
More social workers.
are these kind of grants? I mean, this is a through a program. There's all kinds of grants on here, but not too many went to school districts. But I don't know, from anyone's perspective, what do we?
Screening always measures a point in time. So you could screen someone who is doing well today, and tomorrow something happens in their family that devastates them, and we may miss them. So, what you get on that radar from the screening may not always be really telling of what the kids are experiencing tomorrow. So screening's important, though, and having instruments of screening is nice, but as Kathleen said, you really need people in the building trained who are available, like social workers, to tune in every day. And I think coordination, your district coordinator idea, to keep this work on the radar, the interdisciplinary, being responsive, flexible, understanding, comprehension around how do we connect with equity work, how do we connect with workforce work, and keep this really on the radar of our everyday. I think that's a probably better investment if we got money coming into the district than screening, but screening is a nice component, I would say. Anybody else?
I'm just thinking how overwhelming it is for families to access resources, and even when you identify a mental or chemical health need, what needs to happen for some intervention to take place, because just navigating the system of getting an assessment done and then walking through that process with insurance, and it's a lot of work and it's overwhelming. So to have, I would echo that, like social workers, chemical health coordinators who know that, who can give collateral information to help get the students the support they need, that's been instrumental. And we're fortunate at ALC in that we have a social worker full-time due to several different funding streams. But I can't imagine getting families connected to the resources that we do without that role in the building.
And that's the .8 that's outside of our
Yeah,
budget. Yeah.
that's outside.
And then just to address the question about fundraising, very soon I, through the collaborative, actually are always looking for opportunities of bringing in additional funds to our 4 suburban county school districts. In fact, we were a partner in writing the DHS grant, and so we're open to doing that and always on the lookout for funding opportunities to bring resources into our schools.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Mr. Chapman.
Well, first off, I too want to echo what Mr. Mullen said in terms of thanking all of you for the work that you've done on this. This is an area in my mind that has been long by society denied the appropriate attention that it really deserves. With that said, I guess I'm wondering now what the next step is. We're looking at, in terms of having a district coordinator, the way it sounds, and given that's going to involve expenditures of funds and so forth, is this, and this is, I guess, a question posed to the administration, is this going to be then on the some actionable item on the December agenda, or what? How are we going to proceed with this?
Mr. Lovett?
We've, our estimate is that we need about 1 FTE. A portion of that would be added to current resources that we have that we've not expended for a full-time social worker. Is that about right? 0.8 or full-time?
Well, we have some federal
You're explaining.
funds from special ed.
Why don't you explain the FTEs?
Okay, so we can take some of our federal money from special ed and spend it for intervention, early intervention, right? And we did that for 1.4 social workers so far, and because they weren't quite as expensive as some of our other social workers, we have a little bit of money left, so we were gonna post for another 0.4 social worker, which when we have schools that have 0, that isn't very much, but it's something. So we were, Dr. Kazmierczak and I have had conversations about looking through the budget in the future to make sure that that's something that we can look at before we really commit to how much FTE. I think he's on board. We've talked about it, but we just don't have the exact amount. Maybe.
If I just may add on to that, we'll have a budget revision coming up in January at the January work study. We'll review that, and that's when we would look to see when it might be appropriate or when we'd be able to do something in this area, as with some other areas. But if we were to identify something at that point where we can do it sooner than July 1, we would make that. That'd be part of our conversation. I think it's important to distinguish, though, the point Kathleen is making, and it was made during the PowerPoint, but it was subtle. Special ed funding is one source, and there are restrictions with what that can be used for. The other, one of others, is the general fund. And so if we look at what the general fund has done historically to support social workers, I think that's an important question that we need to talk about, because there has not been support in those positions from the general fund historically. So I think that's where some of the conversation needs to take place when we talk about the budget in January. Your budget will reflect priorities, and this is one of those examples where if this is an area that's been identified as a significant gap for us, then we need to have some conversations about how close that gap.
As Davis and I talked about it a little bit this morning, you know, we have this .4 that we know we can sustain through the end of the year, right? Because it's this year's federal budget. But if we know come January that there is something else there that we could combine, that will give us some sustainability and attract people that might be better candidates in terms of wanting a full-time position rather than a part-time position. So we're sort of thinking, well, if we might just wait until January to see where that goes and then combine the two so we get a full-time position.
And just a budgetary note, when you invest in a district coordinator or even with social workers, part of their job is to leverage additional partnerships and leverage other funding sources. So whatever money you invest in this kind of work, their job is community capacity building. So just understand how that has a synergistic effect for your district and your community.
Right, any other questions? Well, Ms. Daniels, Ms. Fink, everybody on the committee, we had a short PowerPoint here. We also had some of the backup materials ahead of time, but that I know is a tiny, tiny percentage of the just massive amount of documentation of all the work this committee has done, and we are so grateful to you and looking forward to those budget discussions in January to see what we can do to move this initiative along. Thank you so much. All right, we'll turn to item B1B, and that is a review of technology restructuring. Dr. Lovett and Mr. Garrison.
Well, as Mr. Garrison, our Director of Technology and Innovation, comes forward, we also have other members of the presentation team this evening. This specifically is an update that we planned for the school board, but the board also asked in our annual objectives. So after the first quarter, we wanted to come and provide an update on technology restructuring and really a status of things. So, Mr. Garrison, would you begin by introducing us to our guests this evening?
I certainly will. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you so much for having us here. I'm going to just start with this first slide as a way of introduction. It's always been our goal in the technology department to make sure that we have the best technical support possible for our teachers, that we're leveraging the technology out there to maximize learning impact, and that we're really planning for the future and clearing up the systems. And Steve and Penny, Peggy, and Luann and I are going to kind of fill you in on those three things and talk specifically about last March when I presented this exact slide to you, talking about some changes that we were going to make in our department. We use those to talk about kind of each level of the department. We want to report back on how that's going. And I'm very pleased to say, from our perspective, it's going very, very well. And so we're going to work through each one of these, and we'll each share a little bit. We want to start with the technical support. And our technical support is partly about the stuff, the tools, but it's largely about the people. And much of our work over the summer and this fall has really been about bringing people together and really creating a collaborative work atmosphere where we're all looking out after each other. And I stopped by the Tier 1 meeting a week and a half ago, I guess now, and just to share kind of what I'm going to share with you and to kind of get their input on it. And one of the technicians said, we were just kind of going into this year a little uncertain about what our jobs were going to be like, and having been in the district for a while, just not really sure what that was going to feel like. And we just were so glad about how it's turned out, and we're feeling so good about it. So I think that was a real affirmation for me about the strength of our work, and for Steve too, who's done so much work on the coordination end of that. So we're real happy about that, and I'll chime in a few more times here, but for now I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. So our structure now is really this three-tiered structure where we have 7 FTEs now in a Tier 1 support, and what that really allows us to do is to triage issues more quickly as they come in and get them to the correct person who has the ability and the time to take care of it as quickly as possible. The other big thing that this structure leverages is the ability to provide daily on-site support to every school in the district. We that just wasn't possible in our old structure. So that's been really huge, and it's been effective in helping us to really increase the speed at which we are resolving tech tickets as they come in. So our Tier 1 support team is, instead of centralizing those tickets and triaging them when the Tier 1s all take that responsibility on as a team, and we're able to get through them more quickly. We've just noticed this improvement of about 500 tickets that we were able to close in September, more than last year. October, not as many, but when you average them out, looking at last year to this year, we've increased the number of tickets by about 200, so not a lot. But what this slide really says is that we've been able to do that more quickly than we've done in the past. And as Mark was just saying, when we talk about how we're able to do that, it really has to do with our focus on creating a collaborative team. And one of the tools that we put into practice is using a Google Hangout chat. This chat just comes up on the side of our email, and when anyone in our team has an issue or they're struggling with something, they can just hop in that chat, and it pops up on all of our devices. And we thought we'd try this for a week or two and just see how it goes. Let's see what this tool does. And it's been really helpful and effective in our communication because we can leverage everybody's skill sets at once, and we really found it helpful.
Steve, a couple things. On the last slide, I didn't recall seeing the phrase Tier 3 support before or used. Would that be the teachers that we have then?
Tier 3s are really our team that works upstairs here at district. So myself and Peggy and Chris Houtman, for network support, that kind of thing.
The digital learning specialist who you're referencing, Luann is one of those, and she'll talk more about that. We put that in a different part, but because it's just the technical part of the presentation, these are the technical staff as opposed to the learning staff.
On this slide, and I know, I wouldn't want you to sit around and just, finesse the data all the time. That's why we have Brian. But could the drop in October be because there weren't as many tickets required because of the effectiveness of the digital learning specialists? Do you think that might have had a hand in the decrease in the request for assistance?
This really reflects how many tickets we've closed, not necessarily how many requests.
Right.
So it's showing that we've done it more quickly than in the past.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying maybe the reason you didn't have as many requests
is because
of the expertise on site.
Yeah, I think, when we signed our print contract, they just said, we'll give you free professional development, or, we'll include it in this as all the professional development you want, because they know as a company, the more they can train our staff, the fewer technical calls they're going to get. The same is true, as you're saying, for all of our work. The higher level of skill set that staff have around technology use, the more confident they are in doing that small troubleshooting. So I think that's certainly a part of it. But I would just also add that September is also always our busiest time, and so that's just the nature of it.
Oh, yes, Ms. Fahey, then Ms. Newmaster.
Just to clarify, so this is just showing tickets that were closed, not how many tickets came in.
Correct.
Okay, so this is just showing the closed ones, so I don't know how many tickets came in 2015 or 2016.
Nope, not on the slide. We can get that.
Okay, that's just to clarify. Thank you.
Right now, we have about 100 open tickets in our system that are waiting to be solved, and that would be pretty common. And that would be, about each person having about 10 tickets that they're working on. Some will close tomorrow. Some will take a month to kind of get sorted through all the steps to get those closed.
Okay,
I can tell you that there are. It's a similar number. The tickets that were submitted last year in the first 2 months and this year, it was fairly similar.
Because that would be helpful to compare the ones submitted to the ones closed. Thanks.
Ms. Newmaster.
And I was kind of thinking of last year and this year, because I've seen a lot of things with our BSTs, now Tier 1s, we didn't put in tickets for lots of things because they were there, walking through your area, and you'd say, oh, Jackie, this is happening. And she'd say, Shazam, and it would be done. Now somebody has to put a ticket in, and you're probably counting things more that were done informally before. So it shows a good direction, but I think there's also a whole lot of the dynamics of what goes on every day with people in buildings that doesn't necessarily get a ticket. It's like our custodians, school do, where you're supposed to put something in, but if somebody needs something and they walk by, they just do it. You don't make a ticket. So I think it is interesting to know what's out there that's been submitted and not solved, and what kinds of things are, if you analyze it, most commonly done, if you get down to being picky about it, and what doesn't get solved.
It's one of the things that we look at in our weekly meetings with the tier 1s and tier 2s is what are the most common tickets for the past week, and how can we get out in front of that?
Number of tickets.
Okay. Penny?
Many of you probably don't know me. I'm Penny Daly, and I've been with the school district for over 20 years, but in a computer area for over 15 years. And I've had 3 grads from White Bear Lake too. So I've been around a while. But I'm going to talk about the quick response at 23. We're at 23% faster response time than last year. And a lot of it, I think, has to, Steve mentioned the Google Hang. That's when we're all out in our separate buildings or wherever we're at. But what's really helped this year has been getting together weekly, on a weekly basis, and discussing issues at our buildings. Feeding off each other, what's working, what's not working, and we've been able to help each other directly that way. We used to have monthly meetings in the past, but it wasn't the same. This week, there's immediate issues that I have right now, and we know we can get an answer from somebody on that with these weekly meetings. And with those weekly meetings, we've also been able to learn quite a bit. With that quicker response, the learning piece, they've given us access to many different programs that Peggy here used to do on her own. And and with us having access, we've been able to solve problems for teachers, staff, and students right on the spot. And a lot of it's real simple with password changes. We can access right away, and we can continue on with students and staff. For me, I've been dealing with tablets and I've been at Vadnais Heights for over 15 years, but I added Otter Lake and getting their devices going, but it's helped me, with the access that we have, is to get tablets updated and taken care of a lot quicker, because I don't have to wait to find out what was the password for this user. I could just do it myself and take care of that, and so it was done. Also, with the quicker response is we also have tier 2s that we rely on. So if I've been exhausted with the issues or exhausted with ideas, then I can call my tier 2 help and say, look, I've tried all these things, nothing's working, I need your help. And they've been able to either help me with an answer, or if it needs more investigation, they can take the time to do it, and then I can move on and help, another staff or somebody else. Also with with my position, I've been given the duty to come to district tech office once a week and help out. And I've been one of my duties in there was to fix Chromebooks, and I'm kind of going, I don't know, So I did talk with Jackie, another tier 1 tech at North, and she's been taking Chromebooks apart and fixing them for students because of their one-to-one. Went there, spent an hour, and boy, do I know more about Chromebooks in an hour than you'd ever want to know. Came back to District Tech, took a couple apart, fixed them, no problem. I had another two-tier person come in. She goes, I have these two, and I said, okay, let's open it up, and we fixed them right there on the spot, and off she went. So the time, we can fix things, we're learning how to fix things a lot more than what we used to. So as we have the time, and then, like I said, we're collaborating with each other, and getting that access and learning how to do those things, so.
Yes. So we've had numerous, meetings, and we've been explaining the whole thing, but I think for maybe others, it's still a little confusing about who's where and what. So you're a tier 1.
I'm a tier 1, and I go to Agnes Elementary and Otter, and then part of once a week I come over to district and help.
So where physically are the tier 2 people located?
Tier 2s kind of have geographic quadrants, so they'll work with multiple tier 1s in buildings. So they may have one secondary building and 2 to 3 primary buildings.
Are they housed here, kind of, or that they go out?
They really float everywhere. So they do have, some of them have a location to sit with the tier 1, but otherwise they're really out in the buildings. They're here for
and then
meetings and check-ins.
There's 6 tier 3, and
they're here. Yeah. They're here all upstairs.
That would be Chris Hoffman, Pat Succo, Gene Rasmussen, Peggy, Steve, and David Allison.
So then, I guess, and I just wonder things, so I'm not questioning anything. So I hear that a tier 1, and maybe more than tier 1, is brought back here to do something, but that seemed contrary to what the tier 1 purpose.
That was just in my position. There's a few, because we were given the number of students at a certain building, but there's some that do not come here at all. I think there's like three of us?
Yeah. 3
of us that come here. So not all of them come here.
Yeah,
to
I know, but is that kind of the motto, though? Or is,
So that
I guess we thought tier 1s would always be in the schools.
So they can provide the first level support at district, that the district needs as well. So they bring in just for a couple of hours, so they can do the first level support at district.
And we don't always have somebody in our office. It's just throughout their schedule, kind of throughout their week, and their building needs always trump what's here, unless we've got a pressing issue right here. But people are able to go where they need to go. And we also had some flexibility early on, where one of the schools had more tickets than they could be getting through as quickly as we wanted, so we were able to double up on staff there. So we've got just a little bit of flexibility in our scheduling, not much, but enough that we can shift people a little bit to address needs.
And is most of the work that's measured, kind of like Marge is saying, if you have something, it's got to, and that's, I think, to me, it's a good thing, you got to put it in as a ticket. So like the old days when you just had somebody do something, we might then, maybe before we didn't do it, but now we're saying, all right, do the ticket, even if it's after the fact, just so we can log it. Is that kind of the way it's going?
We've been trying to get people to use that ticketing system to keep records more and more in the last couple of years.
Because if they don't, then these numbers don't mean as much.
Right. But this year, yeah, even more so.
And for us, more important than the numbers is what we're able to do with that data. So Steve mentioned those weekly meetings where they said, okay, here are the most common tickets from the last week. What can we do to make sure these aren't the most common kind of tickets we're dealing with next week? If we don't have that data, then that's a harder conversation to have, and it's a little more anecdotal. And we rely on both, but the tickets are really important.
Old school, as you mentioned, it's still there. That hasn't gone away. There's still, like I said, I can't walk from one end of the hall to the other end of the hall without being interrupted, and I forget, like, okay, where am I heading? Because they see me coming down the hall, it still happens. Oh, can I quick ask you, I just have this quick question. That still happens. I don't think that's ever going to go away. It's not to say that we're robots and we're just going to say, no, I'm, doing my own tasks. It still happens. It still happens that, we'll get questions. But, I've noticed, though, this year it's been good for us that we get those questions, but we've been having the support, like, if it needs to go to like somebody like Luann, you know, then they feel, okay, yeah, you know, we can get your digital support, they can go more in depth and detail and give you support on how to do that. Where us in the past, okay, I can get you on there and I can show you this, but I can't sit with you for a half an hour and figure the whole thing out. And now we can, well, at least I feel that we can now go to a digital specialist and say, you know, this person asked me this, you know, we need to, you know, can you help, you know, give them a call, and we have an avenue to send them to, which is very, very helpful. So.
Can I just, and so, we're talking about students, Chromebooks, and other devices being, but they don't do, we call them footprints, tickets, right? So somehow that gets figured into the whole thing. So I guess just one point I'm making is I know that things, that collaboration, all that is good. For measurement of success, in my mind, it would be coming from the students. We'd have like, you know, satisfaction measurements from before the new technical support system, you know, and staff saying, you know, things are this much better, this much faster and stuff. And I don't know if we have that or not. I didn't see it in here.
I think that's kind of part of what Luann can talk about a little bit, is her interactions with staff and how the digital learning specialists are working with that. So let's move along, just kind of in the interest of time here.
Just to sharpen George's Tier 2 question before we move on. Is there a fixed base to which they report at the beginning of each school day?
Yeah. Every Tier 1 and Tier 2 have assigned places at the beginning of each school day, so that they're there at least 45 minutes before the school day starts to support teachers. So every building is supported.
So with the Tier 2s, what are their initial points of duty?
Oh, it varies. I can look it up.
Then that's not a fixed location. Is there a place to where they go at the beginning of each school day? The
Yes.
Tier 2s?
Yes. Yes, a place that each school goes. Just,
Are you saying that changes daily, or?
no, it's the same.
Okay, so where do they
We just
go?
know that all the buildings are covered, so we still
Okay, where do the Tier 2s go at the beginning of each school day?
Hang on, we'll check it out.
Okay.
So we'll check this out.
Well, yeah, with the Tier 2s, I think it depends. So like, okay, so I'm a Tier 1, so I'm assigned to certain schools, and Tier 2s are assigned. So like, if that Tier 2 is kind of going off of what us Tier 1s are trying to figure out also. So if there's a really big issue at North, that Tier 2 is gonna head to North, you know, or they're gonna head to Lincoln if there's, so they're not set in one school the whole day waiting for it. We call them and say, look, yeah, and they're kind of mobile that way, say, you know, I need some help here. I can't get this, so that, you know, can you come over here? And so, are they in one particular school? At the beginning of the day, they are, so we cover
So
staff,
the
but-
Tier 2s cover Otter, Hugo.
No, I know the quadrants.
Pardon?
I know the quadrants. Where do they begin their days?
Yep, that's what he said. Daryl begins at Otter Lake, Jim at Hugo,
All right.
Juan at Lake Airs, and Rob at PLC. That's what those four start areas.
Okay. So you're going to list the schools in each quadrant then? I knew that, but, you know. Okay, thank you.
We had a request from one board member that we just allow you to finish your presentation, then we'll open it up for questions at the end. Would that make more sense?
It's fine.
With the exception of Don?
No, it's all right. Go ahead.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
So one of the other things that this new structure has allowed us to do was, in addition to increasing the speed in which we're closing tickets, we've been able to spend more time on specific in-depth projects, and one of them one project we logged over 250 hours working on a very in-depth project, and we would have loved it to go even faster, but previously we wouldn't have had the capacity to do this, and it's really those having 4 Tier 2 technicians available to the district that teamed all together that allowed that kind of thing to happen while we continued to increase the rate in which we report tickets.
So with that, we're going to switch from the kind of the technical aspect to the learning aspect, and I'll turn it over to Luann Klubja for that.
Hi, I'm Luann Klubja. I'm one of 6 digital learning specialists, and I work each day to have an impact on learning. And I also, this isn't in my notes, but I just want to say this, I just feel like we have such an awesome team. I know as a teacher, I would have given anything to have a group like this who was there to respond to my needs and help me navigate. The tier 1s, the best way to describe them is triage. They're doing an amazing job of triaging and making sure the right person gets there. The right person might be the digital learning specialist if it's about needing to use a tool that we're using. It might be one of our tier 2 techs who know how to fix things. But the response is amazing, and I feel like when I'm at Vadnais, I know that Penny is one of my teammates, and I know that Jim Marrier is one of my teammates. And so that we're all kind of working together towards that. We're also partnering with teachers, staff, parents to increase capacity through support and training that strengthens the 4Cs tech integration in our schools. And we support teachers and students in goal setting, in integrating 4Cs, in digital citizenship, in resources, and we employ a variety of methods to do that. We're 6 very different individuals with different backgrounds, different core curriculums that we have taught, different grade levels we've taught, but together as a team, we're able to figure things out. We also, the Google Hangout thing has been amazing for us because if I have a teacher who asks a question that I can't answer, I have a team who's going to help me find the answer. Sometimes that's through coaching, sometimes it's through co-teaching, sometimes it's through an observation. We're doing a lot of professional development and curating resources for teachers. Every time I do PD, I get a whole list of new followers on Twitter, and I become a part of their personal learning network. So they follow me, and I spend lots of evenings on Twitter finding new things that we all need to learn to help us be better at what we do. I often get emails asking if I can find information or come in and demonstrate a tool. I don't know if you know this about teachers, but teachers like to know things perfectly before they teach them. And unfortunately, when it comes to technology, that means you don't want to teach it because it could be a little scarier. Part of what I do is go in and demonstrate how you don't have to know everything. You're a facilitator of learning. We don't have to be the purveyor of all knowledge. And so we can go in and just help a classroom, for example, learn how to use Google Maps when there are things I don't know. So I let the students teach me, and they oftentimes learn faster than I do, so it's all good. We also might be mentoring students, lesson planning with teachers, and also when we find new digital tools, we can go in and actually demonstrate for the teacher, but also demonstrate for the class. We also talk to teachers, staff, students, and parents about the 4Cs, but not just that. We also talk about learning spaces, how best to have our students create and demonstrate their learning, because we know that technology is not about consumption, but should always be about student creation. And we also know the power of technology as a communication tool. As I said before, there are 6 digital learning specialists, which is 4 FTEs. And I personally have 6 schools that I am at, and so I am able to make sure that I have certain times when I can go into those schools, as well as my friends who are doing this do too. But from September to mid-November, we made 528 connections with teachers, staff, and administration. That's a lot. And 90% of those were face-to-face. At the beginning of the year, we were getting a lot more emails saying, Luann, I need to know how to do this, and we would talk about how we were spending some time answering emails. That's not happening anymore. We're now building relationships with teachers that are in our schools that we're covering where they want to see us and they want us to come in. And so, for example, at one of my schools, I have teachers who sign up on my appointment calendar every week, and every week I walk in and they have one new thing they want to work on. And that just makes me happy because some of them would probably not be able to move forward if they didn't have somebody who would move forward with them. I walked into a classroom in this building, and they had a really simple little task they wanted to learn how to do, but the goal was for students to be able to create a job, to fill out a job application. And so I helped this teacher create a Google Form job application digitally, because let's face it, our students are not filling out paper job applications. They're going to fill out digital applications. And at the end of it, this is why I'm telling you this, she said, "Thank you. Could you thank district for providing someone to help me?" Because sometimes we know we need to move forward, but we don't know how to do that. So anyway, I'm telling you thank you from her. We have teachers that we do meet with every week, and we also have teachers who tell us that they want to be coached and what they want to be coached in. We have some teachers who kind of avoid us as we're walking down the halls, and yet I have never walked into a room at any of my schools where they have not been welcoming and said hello. And my goal and job is to make sure I help them wherever they are and not have an expectation of where I think they should be right now. We also are working at providing personalized resources. We have a parent screencast that we did for parents. You can only imagine being a parent and having a Chromebook show up at your house. And so we did a screencast for that. We also, every Tuesday, send out tech tips. And oftentimes my appointments are they'll read a tech tip, but they really want someone to kind of help walk them through it. We also, all of us send out a weekly email and with an appointment calendar, and at the end of that it always says, if our appointments don't line up with your life, just email us, we'll figure out a time to come in. We also, as I said before, have teachers and staff that follow us each on Twitter as part of their personal learning network, and we're constantly working on additional ways to keep resources ready and available for teachers, staff, students, and parents. So thank you for all you did to create this new way of doing digital learning for our teachers. I know that they are very appreciative, and I am really appreciative for the opportunity, so thank you.
Thanks, Luann. We want to move on to the last phase of this, which is talking about our systems, and we'll move a little more quickly here. A lot of our work and a lot of the rationale for making this change is so that the Tier 3 people, Peggy and Steve and others, could really focus on some of those big picture issues that help to move our district forward. So we want to talk about a few of those that we're working on. And Peggy, I'm going to turn it over to you here just to talk about how we're streamlining applications a little bit.
Okay, favorite subject of everybody. We continue to streamline the application logins for teachers and students. Right now, we Student Plans, Schoology, Viewpoint, are currently syncing passwords with Active Directory, and we're going to be working this year on Google and Skyward. They're the next applications to kind of bring in and kind of sync up those passwords. Another thing that Luann and I did was we implemented Clever into the elementary schools, and it's providing these elementary kids a single sign-on solution for them. They can either log into Clever using their email address, or they can log into Clever using little badges, and they just swipe them. And then once they're in Clever, they can use Google and many other types of applications. So, yeah, I think they've been using it, so it's good. Yeah, so those are just examples.
And really exciting for us to be able to be working on some of these bigger system things that just take a lot of dedicated time. You need a couple hours of uninterrupted time. And I can't remember a year that I've worked here where Peggy has had 2 hours of uninterrupted time before about January. And so that's been a really nice change for us here.
Yeah.
Just a couple of the things about the technical aspects. A lot on this graph here, but the only thing I really want you to look at is this kind of Mesa piece right here, which shows that on an average day we have about 6,000 people connected to our wireless network, and we're monitoring that all the time. That's how Chris and Pat really spend their days monitoring our network and making sure that everything is working as effectively as possible. And we've got heat maps of every single building, and we're looking at those. And just like your friend network, a computer network like this, you set it up and it's all in place, and then it just takes, you just have to maintain it. And sometimes, just like some of your friends need a little more help, sometimes some part of our network just need a little more help, even though it's a great network and it's all set up properly. And so all these analytics, the graphs I showed you and these heat maps really help us to hone in and tackle problems as they come along. One other change we made this year that's a simple change, but I think has really made a big impact, is looking at our print infrastructure. Last year we had 360 plus print devices in the district and about 133 models. Maintaining that many models was just not very efficient. So we've dramatically streamlined the number of types of models that we have out there and tried to more strategically, based on industry recommendations, place print devices where they can see the best use and match the size of those devices with the need. And one of the things that we rolled out when we pushed this out was a print queue, so that when you hit print at your computer, the paper doesn't spit out automatically. You actually go to the print job and release it, and that increases just the sensitivity of any document. So you wouldn't just have documents just sitting there in the printer. It also has the added bonus of making sure that people aren't printing things they don't need. And over the last 2 months, we've had over 2,300 pages, 23,000 pages, where people have hit print on their computer, but then never actually release that job at the printer, at the print queue at all. And those just kind of go away after a period of time. So we've saved so many pages that people before would have just printed and just left sitting at the printer. So we're pretty excited about that and look for even more savings in the future. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Peggy and Steve to kind of wrap things up here, talking just about a few projects that we're working on now. And then I've got just one more slide to kind of show you things we're working on before we finish.
Yeah, so one of those projects that we're constantly monitoring is our one-to-one. We're in our 3rd year now, and so we've expanded to 6th grade, 11th, and 12th grade. So now our current one-to-one program has 6th graders through 12th graders carrying Chromebooks. That's about an additional 1,900 Chromebooks to our one-to-one, and we also added an additional 500 Chromebooks to our elementary schools. We were able to deploy Chromebooks to 1,100 students at South Campus the first day of school in under 90 minutes, which was a pretty impressive feat that took a lot of coordination with the building. And then we have our Student Tech Depot helping do some of that support. Have you had any interaction with Tech Depot?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that are in Tech Depot, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Those are our people.
Those are our
They are
people.
great.
And so Josh Lane at South Campus has done a
he's
great
great.
job of coordinating that Student Tech Depot. So that's the first line of contact for support for students. When you're asking about student support, is their Student Tech Depot
Yeah, I
team.
go to Tech Depot like at least once a week.
There you go. And that coupled with the building administration, Carrie Barth, who's had experience when she was at Sunrise with the one-to-one, and our Tier 1 Sherry Boncher, all working in collaboration, has really been great support for the one-to-one program, adding it to South Campus. Peggy,
Okay, True Time. We've been working with finance and HR to implement True Time. True Time is a Skyward module that is used to replace our timesheets, and it's going to be used by non-exempt staff to clock in electronically through Skyward daily. Time clocks were installed at every building, and staff can use their fingerprint, barcode, key code to clock in. The Tier 1 support staff were pulled into the project, and they're the main contact at every building for new staff that come into the building and need their finger scanned or barcode scanned. And yeah, so that's one of the projects. Another huge project this year was we opened up the ability for families to go online and view the information that we have in the student information system, and also request changes and address changes, emergency contact changes. We put online documents in family access so they could read the documents online, they could sign the documents online. It was all done digitally. We had 6,577 student information that was submitted and verified this year. And that's our first year of doing it district-wide. So a lot of schools had parent nights where they brought in Chromebooks, and the digital learning specialists came, and Jean and I came, and we sat down and helped the parents that aren't so tech savvy and had a hard time kind of working their way through it. So the buildings were really good at providing that support for them. So yeah. And then Zscaler, we implemented Zscaler this year. It's our new internet content and web filter. It really allows us to get more granular with our rule sets, and also gives us a lot more options with our reporting. And then we're continuing to work with Ramsey County Library, and we work with the media specialists, the secondary media specialists this year, and expanded the project 6th through 12th grade. Those are some of the projects.
And just in growing that Ramsey County Library project, there's a lot more coordination with them this year, and Peggy did a great job of syncing all the data with them so that they had the data they needed. As a wrap up here, just a few things coming up for our department. Not real glamorous, but our phone system is about 12 years past its expected lifespan, and it's something we'll need to be looking at this year. And it's something we've been putting off as long as possible, and this is the time. So I'll come back to talk to you about that. We'll be upgrading the PCs in the district to Windows 10. New PCs that are shipping in the fall won't be able to be retrofitted to Windows 7 as we've been doing. So this is an upgrade that'll have to happen, and Steve's working on a really comprehensive plan to make sure everyone gets on board. We're also using it as an opportunity to move some people to Chrome OS. Then we continue to monitor bandwidth, continue to help people make sure that they have the best learning space for the technology. And then Peggy and Chris and Steve and all the rest of us will continue to work on really streamlining applications to make sure that that we have the fewest logins necessary for people to get the work they need. So I know we went a little bit over our time here today, and I apologize for that, but I appreciate that, and we'll turn it back to you, Jenna.
Put it up for questions, and Mr. Mullen gets the first shot since you had your hand up before.
Mark, are you, as when you think about updating to Windows 10 and that sort of thing, are you looking at any of the products from Microsoft? I know there's been recently some products that have been available that handle the mail server, which automatically updates all the Microsoft Office products automatically. Is that something we're looking at, or?
Yeah, the whole kind of integration with Windows 10 is a project that Peggy and Steve have been working on, and there's just some funny nuances with all those things, and we've looked at all those components and many more as we make this transition.
And then as a kind of a follow-up, so I just want to, not that I really want to dig into the weeds, but I've been getting some phone calls of concern, and some of them, and I'm just going to use Matoska because that's the closest school to where I live. So if Matoska has a problem, right, what's the process or what's the response time from that level 1 or level 2 or somebody in that area to respond to Matoska typically? I understand that it's different. I understand if they're already there, that's a different story, but how often are they there or are they not there?
Yeah, they are, they'll be at tier 1 there daily, a tier 2 often daily. So they aren't there obviously all day, but there is somebody there at the beginning of every school day, as we mentioned, and then they're geographically located, so if they're not in the building and there's something that needs to be done right now, they can get there pretty quickly. So the response time also varies in how they contact the tier 1. They can call the tier 1 directly. We have that 4-digit extension, which actually forwards to their cell phone, so they can be reached anywhere, wherever they are. Nobody has to know what building they're in to try and contact them directly. They can also dial our old central number, 1334, which actually then gives them a calling tree to press 5 to get the Matoska support. So if they don't know who to call or they don't know that extension, they can do that, or they can put in a bear tech ticket, which will, as I mentioned before, all the tier ones are triaged all day long as we go through, and we'll assign to person who corresponds.
So I had heard earlier on, this was probably a little while ago, and it's probably been fixed by now, but I had heard early on that there was a problem at Matoska, and it took 2 or 3 days for someone to even come out and fix it. And I'm not saying that that's the way it happened. I'm just trying to figure out what. This is why when we originally talked, we talked about still having tier 1, if you guys want to put it that way, in at least at all the elementary schools, because that seems to be probably where some of the bigger issues are. So that's those numbers, the ticket numbers, I'm very curious to see, and I'd just ask you guys to please make sure you're paying attention to that, make sure our students are getting everything they need.
I was a tier 1. I like that direct contact because I've been able to, they call me and I answer it, and I've been able to walk teachers through to fix their problem right then and there, and then we move on. I mean, and then with number of days on tickets, I always make sure I contact them either through email or I personally stop by there to figure out what the actual problem is. So I think most of us tend to try to make some kind of contact and not let wait to go 3 days. But I've seen it in the past too. If it gets in bear tech, if it doesn't get to the right person, or it's not, we don't want that to happen. But it can happen. But I tend to myself make some kind of contact with the person that's sending that ticket or call or whatever.
So is that standard practice for everyone?
That is.
All right, any other questions? Oh, Mr. Chapman. Looking right by you.
I appreciate the feedback that you've given from the technology department aspect. One thing, though, I know, at least in my mind, when we discussed this, having a review back in July or so, I guess I was thinking, too, that we would get some type of feedback from the users. And I guess I would very much recommend that we do some type of survey. I don't know if it's part of the culture survey that we have now embarked on each year, and maybe it can be embedded as part of that. But I think we should get a survey of teachers, a survey of students, and also just to see from a parent's perspective how it is going with their students at home and so forth, if they are grasping and having issues from a technology standpoint. I guess from a World's Best Workforce committee standpoint, it might be worthwhile to engage those parents that are on that committee in this discussion in terms of how to craft those questions relative to parents so that we're hitting the target there. But I guess I would like to hear at some point, probably at the end of the year, toward the end of the year, just what the experience has been on the user aspect of things.
So that aspect of giving user feedback, we use a survey called Bright Bites, which is actually designed by some statisticians out of MIT, specifically for this purpose to look at classroom integration of technology and technical support. And we used to get that twice a year. We got some feedback from teachers that seemed like redundant. So now we switched to just giving it in January. So we have last January's data, and after this January, we'll be able to compare that and give you exactly what.
Okay. And if we could see the comparison, that would be great.
Ms. Newmaster, then Ms. Fahey.
As someone who took those surveys in the past, the frustration with the staff at North was that you couldn't actually make any descriptive. They were like a multiple choice sort of thing. So you really didn't get to express yourself very well. So hopefully any new one will have users saying, this is what we'd really like to be able to respond to at some point. And I know when some of us said this, it was like, it just doesn't fit the data easily. And I've done my share of professional surveys, and I know it doesn't, but you get a whole lot more meaningful responses that way.
Ms. Fahey?
I know, and we tend to get emails when things aren't working. So just You know, and I know there was a period where, and I passed it on the board chair, and it was passed on to you, I believe, Mark, about problems with Wi-Fi access at Central. I was getting numerous emails, and then just that in the same classroom that 75% of the kids could connect, but 25% couldn't, which really kind of throws a spanner in, because teachers were just saying, I always have a backup plan, I always have a backup plan, but now you have, with whatever activity you want to use that for, some of your class for some reason not being able to connect, and the rest can. So.
Yep, and that, the example you brought up is a really good example. I think actually our team working really well together. That ticket came in at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think you guys heard from that person that evening. By the next day, 4 of my staff members were talking to that teacher because it's just the normal way that things get escalated. And there are a lot of different issues that can impact how they log in. It can be the Wi-Fi itself, it can be the physical Chromebook the students using, it can be their login. And it takes some time to sort that out and figure out kind of what I would call quirky instances like that one. But we did, and then we continued to specifically monitor the anchor classrooms a little more closely than others to ensure it's not an issue in the future. So actually, that's exactly what our system is designed to do, is to pick up on that kind of stuff and respond to it.
Thanks.
Ms. Newmaster.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the print just for a second. And I know it's frustrating in the past when you had things out there on the print queue, you didn't want it, and we never had. I loved you saying that finally you had the ability to go in and do something. You got permission, because individuals didn't have the permission to drop things off the print queue at one point. And part of the other problem was when a teacher would print something, sometimes it was like a total mystery as to what the printer was named and where it went. And you discover my 200 whatever. And we would say also, do not print multiples on the computer. Make your one good copy and take it to the copier, because the computer is a very expensive way of printing. So normally you wouldn't print multiples. You'd have your copy make it. So I kind of think some of that is just the way you start up. It looks like you saved a ton, but some of it's getting going in the fall and figuring out where your things are going. But you still need to value different learning styles and teachers' purposes for having print. I mean, I know we try to save paper, but there's a lot of research on learning style and how people read data-dense, non-fiction writing, and how they best input information. So we need to keep that as something teachers are able to choose when it's the best choice. So I'm hoping we're not eliminating, because not everything is digital, and kids really do like often to have something they can scribble up and cut and paste and actually tangibly look at.
Yes, Mr. Kimball.
Just on that, Marge, my understanding was, all they were saying was there were 27,000 copies that from the teacher's classroom got sent to the printer, but then with the system of them going there, clicking the button to get it, they never did that. I don't think anybody was discouraging printing. You know, it was just that they didn't do that second step.
I just want to make sure it's still available to people when it's the best choice. And I'm saying, I think teachers many times make a choice and then don't want it, or students more often do that.
Yeah,
and don't have the choice.
We did a couple of different audits of our print and placed printers around the district based on what is industry best practice, and then talked to principals, and they said, well, you missed this classroom, we need one here. And I said, okay, then we add those in. So I think we addressed as many of those as we could.
And then just real quick, I know, so my biggest frame of reference student-wise is South Campus. You know, even relatively recently, the kind of the word is that Wi-Fi is like intermittent often, so I'm assuming that's one of the areas that's being looked at. And then on the library cards, that's a project, right? That's not done yet, where it's going to be the student ID becomes a library. Is that actually
Every student's going to get a digital library card. Everyone has to be their student ID, place the library card, which is, a card, yeah. A physical card. It looks exactly like the Ramsey County card, except that it says student. It says student on top. We worked on the design with them last year, and that was part of what Dr. Lowe wanted to.
So is this convenience thing, or what's different about that than the actual
I think the difference is twofold. One, every teacher will know that they can send their students to the library, can recommend different library resources, be it homework help or a specific book. And then we can also leverage our student population to ask the library to purchase books that we need. So it's some shared purchasing as well.
All right, any other questions? Yes, Mr. Chapman?
Just one quick comment. Mark, we have talked for a number of years about the number of applications, which seems to be a growing list, and having a unique individual sign-on for those applications. I see the streamlining is on here, and I would encourage you, especially now under this reorganization, if you've got that extra capacity, so to speak, to key in on that. Because to me, it seems like the thing is out of control. That's just my impression. I mean, from a parent standpoint, again, as I've mentioned before, we've got Skyward, Schoology, now Google Classroom. I was at conferences last week, and every teacher I talked to a T, said they are now using Google Classroom. And I'm going, okay, so did we bury now Schoology, or are we in the process of putting Schoology in the grave? From a parental standpoint, there's, I think, a growing confusion, certainly on my part, and I hear it in the PTA meetings and the PTO meetings. And I've heard disgruntledness on the part, frustration on the part of staff, teachers. So I think we've got to get this in collaboration, working in collaboration with the teachers and with the staff, get some handle on the future direction of this thing, because it just seems like, from a parent standpoint, I don't know if I'm supposed to be, for a given teacher, looking at Skyward, Schoology, Google Classroom, or something else that may be morphing out there that I'm not aware of. So I'm just saying we need to address this, and I think sooner rather than later.
Yes. We're well aware of it, and I think there's two issues that you brought up. We're addressing them both. One is the streamlining of applications, and that's part of the work that Peggy and I are doing. The other one draws back into the work that Luann and her team are doing, and this is a little bit of a transition year for us. And you're right that a lot of teachers are transitioning away from Schoology, but when we look at the Schoology use numbers, and originally I actually had them in the slide deck, and then I just kind of ironically trim some content for time, but there's still a huge number of people using Schoology every single day. So we can't just end something like that. We've got to maintain those systems until, because they still serve a real important purpose, right?
But therein lies the problem, in that you've got some teachers, as I say, using Schoology versus Google Classroom versus Skyward. Then you've got others using Skyward. You've got others using, and the teachers, I've heard that they feel compelled, because parents have been trained at one point to look at one place. They're now compelled, as these new applications roll out, to be duplicating their content from one application to another. And I'm going, I think we need a mental health initiative to deal with some of this on the part of staff. I'd be going, what's going on here? So.
Bree? Yeah, sometimes it's frustrating, like my human anatomy class just uses Schoology, and then my ed career class just uses Google Classroom, and I wish that there was consistency among all of my teachers on one application where I can keep everything, not just, I don't know. I agree with what you were saying.
The beta VHS problem.
Yeah. We're getting there. It just takes it takes time, and we need all the teachers to build a lot of content, and once we start together, we need to help people transition out of that, and every once in a while that puts us in a year like this year where we're seeing that transition take place. We'll get there.
Mr. Mullen?
I'd like to definitely agree with Kim, Mr. Chapman, 100%. The other question I would have too is that, are those three services costing the district resources, revenue towards each service? Are we paying for every one of them?
We pay for the things we use, and that's part of wanting to streamline these things, is to limit the number of different systems.
So, then, as a follow-up, then why, I don't remember us talking about Google Classroom.
The Google stuff, we don't pay for.
We don't pay for? Okay, so we're using both of those services that we're paying, we're using those three services, we're paying for two of them.
Skyward and
Skyward, we definitely pay for school, we definitely pay for, yeah. Here's the thing, each one of these fulfills a different purpose for people, right? And that's part of the work that Luann and her team are doing, is really honing in on best practices around these things so that we can make sure that we come up with some common goals that meet all the teachers' needs right now, but also meet the needs that Mr. Kevin brought up of streamlining this a little more.
Mr. Chapman.
It's definitely a goal of ours, I can just tell you.
To piggyback on Mr. Mullins' question there, I'd like to see, circulated to the board what the cost is, what the various applications are, all of them that we're currently using that you're aware of on a mass scale, and what the cost of the applications are.
Sure. Have all that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's just extraordinary, the amount of effort that you've all put in implementing this new system to handle the tech needs. It seems to be going extremely well. We are very thankful. And I think I need each one of your personal cell phone numbers so my husband and I can get all that help we need, because Comcast is not doing it. Thank you so much. Okay, our next item is B1C, update on senior transportation.
Madam Chair, as our talent is moving to the front of the table, I'd like to acknowledge that 2 months ago, Tara Jevan Singh, our adult programs coordinator, provided a very comprehensive discussion about our senior transportation role, the history, and then explained that our next step would be to go out and really connect with all the stakeholders who are affected by any change which would occur. I've tried to keep you updated on that. The materials that Tim and Tara and Wayne have put together, I think, describe in summary form some of what has happened. And Tara is now going to begin this evening by giving you a brief summary and giving you an opportunity to ask questions.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I realize how busy tech is, so I saved them from one more tech ticket. I just went old school. You all have everything I have. My agenda's on a Post-it. All right.
Tara, we have some special guests.
Love it. Yes, we do. So starting out with our community engagement, we've got a couple of representatives from the Lions Club here. So Bob Lundgren and Doug Shepard. And Doug Shepard is also one of our drivers. And one of the things that I really wanted to let you know is after our meeting, the information that was presented at the board packet along with a cover letter from Dr. Levitt and Tim Maurer and myself went out to that long list of stakeholder groups that was in the packet. It went out to over 100 individuals in the community with a request that they then would share it with all of their interested parties that they thought would want that information, and then requesting questions, concerns, more information that wasn't in that packet to supplement those materials as part of our decision-making process. One of the first meetings that we set up was with the Lions Club, and I want to just commend them because after some very thorough discussion and some real important questions, they pretty much came to a pretty quick consensus that maybe although this had been a really important program for a very long time, that the model may no longer be as serving the needs as well as it had been in the past, and that there were other providers who are serving some of those needs, and if they were going to be working long and hard to be raising funds in support of senior services, that they were right along with us and wanting to make sure we were spending them in the best way possible. And I won't speak any more for them except to thank them, because that would have been enough.
for them to have listened to us and then given us their feedback. But as we've taken the show on the road, I've had one, both, 3 Lions with me all along, making sure that folks heard it right from them, their thoughts on it, how they came to their conclusions about stuff, calming any concerns that folks had. So it's been really tremendous to have that support, not just in good times, but also during, transition times too. So, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add to any of that?
You said it all.
Well, I think our role is to assure you that the Lions Club, we have been involved in this process all the way along. The Lion Mobile really started in 1974, so it's about a 40-some year program. I started on the Community Ed Advisory Committee in 1985, and Doug has said he's been a driver for 17 years. He started when he was really young, he said. But, so we have followed this process of the Lion Mobile being a really important program when it started because there were no other alternatives, to now where there are so many other alternatives for parents or for seniors or for handicapped people that the cost of running the Lion Mobile is becoming prohibitive. And the $24,000 to $30,000 that Lions Club spend every year on Lion Mobile, we can find many other places to put it. And Tara has assured us that she's got an eye on a lot of that. So we just want to assure you that the Lions Club feels that what is happening to the Lion Mobile just has to happen.
And I want to say that to most of the groups that we talked through, this is where we ended up. A lot of in-depth questions, a lot of discussing, a lot of concern over our current riders, a lot of concern over senior services and the role of the district going forward. And once we were able to reassure them that, one, the school district is interested in expanding and meeting the needs of a growing senior population. So this is more a reallocation of resources and energy than any kind of taking away. And that we want to include the community in that going forward. So we had a lot of information about that. One of the things that I'll talk about in a second is a transition plan, and that's where we can kind of make sure we've taken care of our riders in the community. There were some specific questions and concerns that folks had, and some of them really led me to explaining to folks that even though should the district transition away from being a direct service provider, that in no means does that mean that we're no longer helping guide folks through accessing services, to advocating if those services aren't going smoothly for them, to working with other local organizations and community members to advocate for greater quality of service and expansion of services from those providers who are doing this work. So that's going to continue as well. And so I encourage folks, as they hear about this process, if they hear about any decisions, as they realize that their friends, family, neighbors, or themselves need transportation services, that even though the Lion Mobile may not be their option in the future, but we are still here to help them access that. And so that's a big part of this process, is making sure folks know that we're continuing to be here. So one of the things I also wanted to let you know was that through all of these requests out there openly, really saying, please tell your friends and family, have them call me, have them write me a letter. Through all of that over the last couple of months, I've had a total of 8 riders let us know their concerns. Not all of them are current riders, and some of them even said, well, I currently use TransitLink, and one of them even stopped by the senior center today with his TransitLink information because he thought other riders might find that helpful. It was great to meet Brian. He was really sweet today. And then the other thing is from the White Bear City Council meeting request to the general constituency and in the White Bear Press, the article that was out, I've had one letter from a non-user who was concerned about potential needs in the future, and we've already working on contacting her and letting her know that if and when that time comes, there are options for her. So it hasn't been a huge concern from the community, but those that have, it's been small enough that we've been able to handle them individually and make sure those concerns are met too. I just kind of wanted to briefly go over what we had put together as a draft transition plan. Given that things have gone so swimmingly with community engagement, we put together a plan that would put in some dates and times considering if there was a decision earlier rather than later. But if for any reason there are questions that are yet unanswered, these dates can always be shifted and shift to whatever time frame feels comfortable for the board. But what we were looking at is basically being able to have an ample amount of time to announce to the specific riders, any potential riders in the community at large, any changes, have about a month of time to get the word out, and then have about 3 months of time where we are doing some one-on-one calling to specific riders who we know are going to need a little extra hand-holding, to have 3 to 4 community events that engages the public at large. We're also using those as focus groups to help us hone in and develop a senior housing, or a White Bay Area senior guide to senior transportation that'll look very similar to this. And then to be able to have that out in time before we would start to slow down or cease actual driving, and we're looking at that after the winter months. So we want to get people through the end of March before we would look at timetabling the ceasing of rides. And then that would give us a good quarter in our fiscal year to tie up any loose ends with any of our grantors and any of the other reporting that we'd have to do. And also to, plan some kind of celebration or party or whatever to celebrate the legacy of the Lion Mobile and allow the community to have one final ride. Yeah. So before I go, I guess we wanted to keep it brief. Do we have any questions?
Questions for Tara or our presenters? Mr. Kimball?
No question, just, I think the fact that there might not be any questions is a credit to the process that was used. So, great job from my perspective.
And if I can say something about the White Bear Lions, they are and always have been a jewel to our community. It seems like any time there is a need in White Bear, the Lions are there. And you've been there since 1974 with the Lion Mobile. The few charitable events I've been involved in, you're there. We need volunteers for the Excellence event. Both of you have volunteered there. You provide scholarships for our students. Anytime there's a need in this community, in particular in our school community and our seniors, you folks have been there. I applaud you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's our job.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
Ms. Newmaster and then Mr. Chapman.
I just want to also congratulate, I've witnessed this process and progress as a member of the community service rec, whatever, senior forum, and I've seen this as the gold standard of community involvement, getting all the stakeholders, just everything they touch is well done. But I do think that this, what could have been a potentially scary, divisive thing, has turned into something really positive and supportive, and I really think everybody involved is just awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Chapman?
And I just pile on. Thank you so much. Because your presence is very evident in the community for so many good things.
So I just have one thing, one more advocacy for the seniors, which is this is the holiday season, and this is the time when families gather. It also is the time when folks check out how mom and dad are doing, and it's the time when we get our highest level of referrals. So I do not at all want to rush any decisions that would be made, and would be happy to answer any more questions or get any information we would need. But for us to be able to give clear and concise information to families as they're calling during this time about what's going to happen with the Lion Mobile in the future, and to be able to let them know this is the plan, would be really helpful to my staff. So I encourage, as soon as we can get some kind of a go-ahead, to go ahead, unless of course there is any information you would need.
Dr. Lovett, did you have anything you'd like to say?
Madam Chair, it would be likely that we'd have a recommendation at our December meeting in 2 weeks. along the themes that we've described here and for the reasons that Tara explains.
Thank you once again.
Just
Oh,
saying,
yes,
just
Ms. Marr,
a quick
please.
moment. As Tara explains everything, she so graciously says we all the time, but I think as you guys compliment the process that has gone through, a lot of it is her genuine concern and genuine passion to help not only the community, but seniors, and her organization for everything has just been outstanding and tremendous, and for how smooth this process has been directly relates to her and her staff at the senior center, so.
Thank you for those words. Thank you, Tara, for your service, and thank you again.
All right. All right, we'll turn to item B2, and that is discussion on laws and policy affecting licensing, compensation, and benefits of preschool teachers.
Madam Chair, board members, this fall, members of some of our colleagues from our preschool teaching staff, many of whom are in the audience behind us here this evening, wave, so we know you're all here, raise some significant questions. Linda Gores will introduce another guest this evening and provide an update to the school board on what she has learned with the assistance of legal counsel and attempt to answer the questions which our board members have rightly raised.
And before we get going on this, I wanted to say a few words to the board about what our purpose is here tonight. We've asked Linda Gores and our outside counsel, Mick Waldsberger, to be here. The purpose is to kind of explain the legalities of where we sit on the consideration of people who teach in our districts. We're not here in open session to begin talking about the types of issues that we may well, in the near future, be discussing in labor negotiation sessions involving these teachers. So this is more an educational presentation by district counsel and our head of human resources. When and if we get to negotiations, then that will be a closed session and we can discuss our negotiating posture in greater detail. All right, now I'll turn it over to Ms. Gores and Mr. Waldsberger.
Thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, Mr. Waldsberger is here to assist us in this discussion because of the complexities and the legal issues that are involved with this. Mr. Waldsberger is from Rupp Anderson Squires and Waldsberger, and education law is one of his specialties, in my opinion. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Waldsberger, and he's got some things to share, and then we'll answer any questions that we can.
Well, good evening, members of the board. The task that I was given was to address the legal status of certain types of teachers. We have ECFE teachers, and then we have pre-kindergarten or school readiness teachers as well. And one of the common questions that comes up is, are school readiness teachers members of the teachers bargaining unit? Should they be members of the teachers bargaining unit? I've just distributed to you a confidential legal memorandum which falls in an exception to the open meeting law and does not need to be distributed outside the board. But it's for your purposes and understanding in terms of where these positions fall, and I'll review it generally with you as well. First of all, the short answer that you need to know here is that in May of 2016, the Minnesota Court of Appeals conclusively addressed this issue and determined that school readiness teachers are not in the teachers bargaining unit. And the simple reason for that is they are not required by either the Minnesota Department of Education or by the Board of Teaching to hold a license. It's not a discretionary issue, as the Court of Appeals said. It's even beyond the Court of Appeals' power if it didn't like it. It's a legislative issue that has determined that to be the case. So let's talk about how we get there, and so you have a full understanding of the issue. First of all, the governing law is the Public Employment Labor Relations Act, or PELRA. I'm sure you've all heard of that. That's what governs labor relations between public employees and public employers in the state of Minnesota. And PELRA says that you generally have the right as a public employee to form a union, to join a union, and to engage in protected activities as a union member. If you join a union or you form a union, however, you have to be in the, quote, appropriate unit, and that is a legal term of art. And in determining the appropriate unit, what we do is look at various provisions of PELRA. When it comes to school districts, the law says that the appropriate unit for teachers is all teachers. Well, that's not real helpful, is it? But then it goes on to define what a teacher is. And that's really our key, and that's on the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2. And the key language here is that in order to be a teacher within the meaning of PELRA, you have to be licensed by the Board of Teaching or by the Minnesota Department of Education. And not only that, you have to be required to be licensed by one of them. So That's our key legal definition. Your teacher's collective bargaining agreement has that same legal definition in it, as does almost every collective bargaining agreement in the state of Minnesota. You really can't deviate from that. So when we're looking at our issue here, again, our issue is, are school readiness teachers required to be licensed by the Board of Teaching or by the Minnesota Department of Education? In the case I mentioned that came out in May of 2016, it arose out of the North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale School District. It's a case that my office argued. And in that case, the Court of Appeals, again, conclusively said, no, you're not required to be licensed to be in one of those positions. The union advanced several arguments for why it thought teachers were required. The court said, no, that's simply not the case. The union argued, well, as a matter of public policy, teachers should be required to be licensed, or teachers, let me back up, school readiness teachers should be in the regular teachers' collective bargaining agreement. And the Court of Appeals said, regardless of whether that's the case or not, again, that's within the purview of the legislature to determine. The courts don't determine that. And by way of example, some of you may remember a few years back, the issue of whether early childhood family education teachers belonged in the collective bargaining agreement or in the appropriate unit came to light in the courts. And actually, it was in a case that I argued in front of the Minnesota Supreme Court. And the Minnesota Supreme Court held at that time, again, same thing, as a matter of public policy, we can't change that. As a matter of public policy, the legislature has spoken and said that ECFE teachers at that time couldn't be in the teachers' bargaining unit because they weren't public employees. Well, the legislature came back and changed that. Said, okay, we hear the will of the people, we're going to change that. That has not been the case with school readiness teachers. It has not been the case with pre-kindergarten teachers. And the unions have argued very vociferously to the legislature that pre-kindergarten and school readiness teachers should be treated like any other teachers, but the legislature has not agreed to date. And, I'm not here to get involved in the social issues of the debate on that, but there are a couple of things to keep in mind. This isn't a pro-union or an anti-union issue. From the legislative standpoint, we have statutes that we have to follow, for one. For two, this is an area in which the legislature has stated that school districts should have maximum flexibility. Why is that? We have changing numbers. It's a voluntary program. It's not a compulsory program that we're dealing with. School readiness and pre-kindergarten programs are traditionally fee-based programs, meaning if you raise the cost, if you put them under the teacher's collective bargaining agreement, and your school readiness instructors have to be paid just like any other teacher, have to get all the benefits of any other teacher, the cost to the community can go up significantly. Programs can then fail and disappear altogether, and so the legislature hasn't seen fit to do that. Also, there can be some unintended consequences of saying, okay, we're going to require that these positions be positions for which a license is required by the MDE or the Board of Teaching. What's the downside of that? We don't just say you have to hold some license. We say you have to have a license in the relevant area. And some of our current folks might not have a license, and I believe, in fact, don't have a license in the relevant area. And so by taking that kind of action, you may have the unintended consequence of putting some of these folks out of a job. So we have to be careful about how big of a swipe we take at things, and the same thing with the legislature, and I think that may be one of the reasons why the legislature hasn't stepped in to date and said, we're going to change the law in this respect. But this does raise issues. There's often questions about it. It can be complicated. I've tried to lay it out for you in a format that you can go back and refer to and track through. But I wanted to just be here in case you had any questions or concerns. As the chair said, this is not really the time to talk about negotiation strategy or anything of that sort. That's certainly something that should happen in closed session. But if you have questions about the legal analysis or why these positions fall outside the bargaining unit, I'm happy to entertain those at this time.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Waltzberger regarding his legal analysis? All right. Mr. Kimball.
Yeah, I'm trying to have it all sink in. You go pretty fast. Can you talk more about ECFE? So, because ECFE teachers are required to hold a license, and is that a specific license?
ECFE teachers are required to hold a license. It is a specific license, and the license depends on the type of ECFE instruction that's being provided. I've given you kind of a cursory overview of that on the second page of your materials. And first of all, to step back, at one time, ECFE teachers were not even considered public employees who had any protections under Pell Grant. As I mentioned, that's what the Supreme Court said. The legislature changed that. Since that point in time, it's come around so that they are public employees, and the MDE came out with an advisory memorandum saying that ECFE teachers are, in the view of the MDE, required to hold a license, depending again on the type of ECFE instruction they provide, and it ties back to the type of aid that's received for that instruction, and so you see that in the materials. And so I can't tell you exactly off the top of my head what that is. It's early childhood or what it is in particular, because it's going to vary depending on the type of aid. But they are required. The courts have said that we're going to give deference to the MDE's opinion in that area. Conversely, the MDE has said that school readiness or pre-kindergarten teachers who don't otherwise meet the definition of an ECFE teacher are distinguishable, and there is no license required for those. Very good question.
And we have 4 ECFE teachers who are in the teachers' bargaining unit. Does that mean we have 4 ECFE teachers or 4 that are in the bargaining unit?
We have 4 teachers that are required to have that pre-K, pre-kindergarten, adult parent and family education license for that part that, as Mr. Waldesberger explained, is the ECFE portion. So they're actually teaching that those classes that are different than what our preschool teachers are teaching.
And we properly include those in the unit because they're required to hold that license.
And then I kind of lost at the end there. The courts have ruled that they are properly not mandated, the pre-K and school readiness teachers are properly not mandated to be in the teachers' bargaining unit. But can they be? I mean, can districts negotiate that? Or they're just saying that there isn't any mechanism to automatically have them in?
Yeah, but there's no mechanism to automatically have them in, for sure. And the only way you could legally put them in would be for you as a school district, and this is debatable, it's a kind of a debatable area of the law. But the argument would be that if you as a school district specifically required a specific license, that by doing so you could put them into the bargaining unit. I say that's debatable because there is an older case, it's from the 1980s, where it was recognized that by doing that, a school district might bring employees into a bargaining unit. However, since that point in time, we've had a case that was heard by the Minnesota Supreme Court interpreting almost identical language within the context of activities directors. And in that case, the school district required the activities director to hold a license as a principal. And the activities director argued then that, in that case was a he, was entitled to the protections of the principal's collective bargaining agreement and to the protections of what's equivalent to tenure, the continuing contract law. And the Minnesota Supreme Court said no, because the statute says required to hold a license by the Board of Teaching or the MDE, meaning those entities require the license, not the school district. And I think given the development of the law, there's a high probability that it would turn out that way as well. So putting that aside, then there's the question of, who's going to argue if you do? Will a member of the community bring some kind of an action saying that you have made some expenditure that you shouldn't, that you have somehow tied future boards' hands, et cetera? Those are all philosophical debates or potential things that could happen, but the reality is probably not going to be too many complaining parties. It's just, it is going to tie your hands in terms of flexibility and do those things that the legislature said, these are the reasons why we're not going to do it, not going to require it. And so if you require it unto yourself, you may then have those consequences down the line.
And is that where we kind of moved into, if someone would decide to require the license, it would have to be a specific license? Is that, and then you might inadvertently, people may lose jobs who don't have a license or the license.
That's correct. Yep. Because you'd have to require a specific license through the Board of Teaching or the Minnesota Department of Education. And if one of your current, or whoever
does it, we're not quite sure.
And so if any of your current employees didn't have that, then they could end up being out of a job because of that. And so that's one of those potentially unintended consequences that you might not want to go down that road for. If it's a issue of compensation, there are other ways to address that as opposed to, trying to manipulate the law to bring somebody within a bargaining unit.
And then, so I'm, I don't know if I want to say embarrassed, but I'm not an expert in ECFE versus pre-K. I don't know all the differences, but ECFE requires a license, and that might have to do with federal laws or something. But if we were to, I don't know if anyone here even wants to offer this, but what's the argument if you're not ECFE, but you're early childhood or pre-K? Are you saying, I'm doing what they're doing, right? Or what? What's the difference?
They do teach different classes. Both Kate and Danielle are here too, and we welcome them to join the discussion to be able to really explain to you the difference between the ECFE teacher classes that they teach in the preschool teachers that are other non-affiliated teachers are teaching. Kate, do you want to join us? Danielle? These are the experts on what so Kate Anderson and Danielle.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest differences with the ECFE is there's a parenting component to it, and so our staff are dealing with parents in those classes. The ECFE classes are usually 0 to 3. Age groups in our pre-K is 3 to 5.
So age is different?
Age is different, and then the parenting component.
The funding sources are also different.
Absolutely, right. ECFE, we have state funding, and school readiness has funding also tied to that. And for school readiness, as long as I, as the supervisor, hold the license, those teachers are not required to have the age-specific license, such as the birth to 3rd grade or a pre-K, early childhood family education.
The FTE, the general FTE differences between them? Is there even a?
So jump in if I'm getting this wrong. Our 4 teachers that are on the teacher's contract are, their hours are more regulated than what the teachers that are in the preschool classes, because those are more driven by ones that are signing up, and they can vary on a
correct
quarter by quarter, or how you.
We actually register for the year for ECFE as well as our preschool program. The licensed ECFE teachers are in the contract based on the FTEs. It's extremely rare to ever have anybody to a full-time status in ECFE because of the funding. Our per pupil fee isn't as much as a regular K-12 teacher. And I apologize because I'm new myself and I'm trying to figure out White Bear Lake's differences in other districts that I've worked in. But here we have a certain number of hours each teacher can work, correct?
Are we talking about school readiness now, or are we talking about ECFE?
For both.
For both. ECFE is our point allocation for FTE, correct. And that's based on if we have one ECFE teacher at a full-time rate, we can't offer as many of a variety of classes over a variety of time slots. So we have 4 different teachers, one that's serving as an outreach person that can go out in the community and have classes like at Solid Ground and at some of our other community.
We do some outreach classes at different locations such as
5-star estates.
Correct.
Or different apartment complexes where we're trying to reach our population of families that can't get to us. And then we have 3 other teachers that are working part-time positions that are classroom teachers, as well as one that goes into St. John's Hospital
to do welcome baby visits with families. So those are kind of pieced together and puzzled together to offer as many options as we can to families of different age groups. And then our preschool teachers, we currently have 8 or 9.
We have like 12.
11? 12, thank you. It's grown since I've been here. 11 different teachers that work anywhere from 2 half-days a week, which is 3.5 hours each of those days, to 4 or 5, almost 5 full days. I think we have one teacher that works 4 full days and a half a day. And that's based on enrollment, class offerings, staff schedules, and what they've shown interest or have said that they want to be able to work, as well as trying to maintain some of the cohesiveness of teams that have worked together in our inclusion program between our special ed teachers and our regular ed teachers, for consistency of the staffs and the working teams, as well as what's great for kids. So we have kind of this huge puzzle piece that we work to meet as many possible needs and opportunities for class offerings for families and age groups.
And locations.
And locations.
Within our district.
Oh, yeah. And I guess it's probably first off for Mick and for Linda. We've heard now what we can't or probably can't do. In terms as far as these folks here, bringing them in or not to master contract, what options do they have? Can they create another bargaining unit? Can they bargain with the district directly? I mean, what are the options, I guess, is
And
what's going around in my mind.
Let me preface that. I'm going to leave it in Mr. Waldberger's discussion. If you believe this is an issue that should be discussed in closed session, just tell us that. But I know you did say about 10 minutes ago, just because of your legal analysis doesn't mean we can't pay them more. So what options, what legal options are available here?
And obviously, I don't represent that group, and I want to be careful of the advice that I give in an open session one way or another. I think that if your concerns are compensation, again, you look at the 3 factors that arbitrators look at in the event of a labor dispute when you go to an interest arbitration. You know, we talk about fairness. Fairness is the subjective element that nobody can really pin down. But we can talk about data through these 3 factors. Factor number 1 is your external comparisons. Factor number 2 is your internal comparison for any like positions, relative degrees of raises, things of that nature. Factor number 3 is your ability to pay as a school district. What is your ability to pay? And so those are the factors I'd encourage you to look at when it comes to compensation. I'd also say that what is commonly done with groups like this in order to maintain flexibility is that there are terms and conditions that are either established unilaterally by the board for the group, or there can be sort of a pseudo-collectively bargained group of terms and conditions for the group. And typically what will happen is you'll say, okay, we'll see a percentage raise. So let's say your teachers got, you know, I don't know what your teachers in this district got. Let's say they got 1.5 last year on new money on the schedule. That you would typically give a 1.5% raise to this group as well. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have all the same benefits, because they're not going to be working the same hours, because you need that different level of flexibility. So that's what I would commonly see are terms and conditions, either established or loosely bargained with a group like that. And I would say that that's probably the vast majority of the districts across the state of what we see. Districts that have ECFE teachers in the bargaining unit also commonly have different pay scales and different benefits. It's not uncommon for those licensed positions, which are part of the bargaining unit and should rightly be in that bargaining unit, but to nonetheless have a differentiated salary schedule, differentiated terms and conditions in terms of what we're going to require of a workday, and also the insurance benefits and so forth, while still, of course, honoring the Affordable Care Act and other requirements of law.
Go ahead.
Could you repeat what you said as far as what the vast majority or vastly the number of other districts that are doing what? I didn't catch that. I'm sorry.
In my experience, the vast majority of districts are either unilaterally establishing terms and conditions of employment for school readiness teachers, or alternatively are loosely bargaining with them, even though they're not a certified unit, but getting their input, hearing what's important to them, taking that down, and then coming back in what are still terms and conditions that the board has the authority to modify. And so, for example, in the North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale case that I referenced earlier, what happened in that case is that at one time, individuals were members of the bargaining unit, the district changed its organizational structure, it went to this pre-K school readiness program, and then the district decided there it was going to establish more, again, of the terms and conditions for the unit. I have other clients that I represent that I know get that informal sit down kind of together, what's important to you, what are your hopes, expectations, dreams, and then the board talks about that and then would typically establish that or give some, again, some recognition to the group even though they're not a certified bargaining unit. That makes sense?
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Waldsberger particularly, thank you at the last minute for joining us here tonight to explain this. And, you know, I will recall that at a regular meeting not that long ago, we had a speaker at Public Forum from the group behind us who did a very, very good job explaining the difficulties that the school readiness teachers have faced in this district. And I think we can say we are committed to attempting to address their issues in some way, shape, or form. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you. All right, we'll do one more. If everybody's hanging in there, we'll do one more agenda item before a short break. And that is item B3, update on superintendent recruitment and selection process. And I'm going to turn it over to member George Kimball, who chaired our subcommittee on process. Mr. Kimball.
Thank you. Let's see. I've got a handout I'd like to give to the board members. I've been asked to sit in front of the microphone. Okay, so as board members know, and most know, the board created a subcommittee. Kim Chapman, Ellen Fahey, and myself to just do some preliminary research and discussion about how to best go about the process of the superintendent search. And so we have met ourselves, and we also had a special board meeting at which all board members were present. And at that meeting, we had a Minnesota School Boards Association rep just give us some training and some information on how to, the things to consider in putting together a superintendent search. And so based on all of that, we have a recommendation. Now, what I don't know is what then we will do with the recommendation, so maybe we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that, so.
That's great. So I think I actually want to go through this entire document just so I don't miss anything. And this was put together by the three of us. It doesn't go into all of the particulars because some of the particulars that should this recommendation be totally or in part approved in some manner, then some of the details will have to be decided later. But we have some general philosophy and plans that we are recommending. So starting out with sort of a
philosophy, we recommend the school board contract for services with what we're calling a consultant advisor to assume process responsibilities that is specifically designated by the school board, as opposed to hiring an individual or firm that is out, these type of firms are out there that would take full or substantial control of the process. We recommend that the consultant advisor take a lead role in potential community survey development, or any kind of a survey that would just go out in a not an in-person type situation. This advisor would also organize and moderate district and community stakeholder input sessions, advise on a vacancy brochure, and would work with our communication staff on that. Provide suggestions on application content, interview questions and interview format, and on advertising strategies. They also would screen applications and perform other responsibilities as deemed appropriate by the school board. We further recommend that all school board members have full access to all applications that come in, and that applications that are not considered for interviews be available for review by the superintendent search subcommittee before the applicant list for the first round of interviews is finalized. In other words, we don't want to find out later that there were applicants that were deemed not meeting the desired qualifications to make the interview, and we never knew about them, or we might find out later. We want to keep control of that and not have any surprises, I guess. We recommend that the estimated maximum expenditure by the district for costs related to the superintendent search not exceed $10,000. Now that's a tough figure to come to at this point, but we're saying that is certainly subject to review and may be adjusted, but that's kind of a goal. We recommend school board members ultimately decide the hiring criteria and desired characteristics for our new superintendent. However, we recommend the school board should give serious, substantial, and transparent consideration to criteria and desired characteristics put forth by district and community stakeholders. We recommend that representative district and community stakeholders, using a process to be determined, be provided access to superintendent finalists in a controlled setting, which finalists will interact with the stakeholders, and stakeholders will then provide feedback to the school board based on the interaction. And then we have a suggested recommended hiring timeline, allowing for adjustments as needed, November, December. Develop and submit a request for proposal or the equivalent for the consultant advisor. Select the consultant advisor, so we're already almost in December. Develop a detailed search budget, develop the application and search brochure, and announce the vacancies. So our goal is to have the vacancy announced by the end of December. In January, gather stakeholders' input, develop selection criteria and interview process. February, screen the applications, develop interview questions. Then March would be big month of interviews of the finalists, conduct second interviews, plan and conduct site visits, and then conduct reference checks. And our goal, and somehow it just seemed fitting that this be tax day, that we have made a decision by tax day. It has no real connection, but and have make the announcement and selection by April 15th, negotiate and execute the employment contract, and develop the orientation process for the new superintendent.
Mr. Kimball, Mr. Chapman, Ms. Davies, thank you for this excellent memorandum, and the process is very well thought out. I did get a text message during your presentation asking if there are copies of this for the audience. I would like to point out that Mr. Kimball read from this document verbatim, so everything that he read is on this document, but we can, if anybody comes up to me afterwards and asks for a copy, I'd be happy to share it. I agree with every recommendation you made. As far as timeline goes, our trainer from the MSBA recommended that we get an RFP out. If we were going to contract with any outside consultant or advisor for any services whatsoever, and your recommendation is we should, and I agree with that, we should get the RFP out as soon as possible. To approve a contract with an outside advisor, we would need to approve that at a regular school board meeting. Our next meeting is December 12th, and we have no following meeting in December. We couldn't convert a work study meeting into a regular meeting because we don't have a work study meeting in December. So my recommendation would be that we go along with all of the subcommittee's recommendations and we ask Ms. Gores to assist us with putting this RFP out as soon as possible with a response time of 7 to 10 days from outside consultants with the intent of making a recommendation to the board at our December 12th meeting for approval of an outside contractor. Any discussion or comments?
So are you like making this is not a motion that?
No, because this is not we don't take any action at this meeting, but I want to give recommendations to administration of what we may do before December 12th so that we can take legal action on a contract by December 12th. It's a lot of work to do in 14 days, but I think Ms. Gores can do it. Yeah.
Work factor.
Let me ask Ms. Gores if she thinks it's doable before I commit her to that.
No, unfortunately, I missed the MSBA presentation.
We have a 3-hour tape for you to listen to.
I started listening, so I've got a ways to go on it. I think we can absolutely, we'll do our best.
Okay. Ms. Fahey.
We also have a nifty little booklet that's easier than listening to the tape, I'm sure. Yes. And I know that there was quite a bit of discussion, and also on the subcommittee, in terms of going back and forth between doing the process ourselves or hiring someone to help us with a portion of the process. And we decided, instead of lumping a lot of things on our district employees, to look for someone who can help us with some of the coordination, but certainly wanted to move away from a search firm that has a stable of candidates and takes over the whole process. And we want some control over that applications and the screening of the applications to see all the people that do.
And if we prepare an RFP, it seems that the second full paragraph in George's section entitled General Recommendations, you take that second full paragraph and convert that into a bullet-pointed list of this is what we want out of an outside consultant advisor. That would pretty much do it for an RFP. Any other discussion? Or yes, Mr. Mullen. Sorry, I didn't see your pencil.
I want to thank the subcommittee for the work, and I fully support this.
Any other thoughts? Yes, Mr. Chapman.
And obviously, Linda, if you need to have questions or need some direction, feel free to reach out to any three of us. Be happy to do that.
And if anyone has the book that MSBA gave us that we can give to Ms. Gores ASAP, that might be helpful. Very good. Very good.
It's all yours. I've read it.
That was very helpful. All right, we have some direction then for administration, and hopefully we will have a recommended consultant for approval at our December 12th meeting. Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Mr. Chapman, Ms. Fahey, a lot of work done very, very well. Thank you. And now, I spoke at this, we still have several agenda items left. I do want to give people a short opportunity for a break. So I will entertain a motion for a 10-minute recess at this point. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And I will second that. We are in recess for 10 minutes. Please be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. 10 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Gray. Our 10-minute recess has ended, so we will turn to our next agenda item, which is D4, overview of opportunity to participate in state QComp program. Ms. Paul, Dr. McKenzie, happy birthday! Thank you.
I had a big, lead up. I was going to get there, but, that was well done.
Exactly.
Well, you think about, who was up here during that mental health review, who's getting chairs for people, and making sure that he's here for this, he was not going to miss tonight. So birthday boy.
I will grab it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Chair Newberg, members of the board. We are here just to talk to you about what we've been working on since last winter in terms of trying to look and see what the opportunity of QComp, quality compensation for teachers, might be in terms of an opportunity for the district. So last year in the winter, there was a group of administrators and teachers that went to the Minnesota Department of Education workshop to hear about what the opportunity was. Both Dr. McKenzie and I have been together meeting with administrators, with teachers, with our that serve on our educator evaluation committee. We submitted an application to the Minnesota Department of Education, and we are in the queue for QComp, which means that we are second in line in order to access funds next year. These are optional funds that you apply for. And so we've got this broad framework that now we need to really look at putting some detail to the plan, and in thinking about the importance of building trust, making sure that we're transparent about the work that we do, and having people see the opportunity that these additional funds could bring. Dr. McKenzie and I felt that it was important to make sure to have a very high-level conversation with you so that before we engage any at building level conversations and a conversation about what we would do with these additional funds, we didn't want to come back in at a work study later on this winter to find out that you weren't really that jazzed about the whole idea. So really our purpose is just to have a high-level conversation to make sure that you are aware of kind of the parameters that we've been operating in. And Brian, if you could just flip to yep. I think right there, yeah. This is probably the critical thing we wanted to communicate to you. I know that you've seen the slides and had a chance to review them in advance. There's two different ways that you can access QComp funding. One is money directly from the state, and then the other portion is through a levy on the public. And we are not at this time pursuing any of the public levy dollars. What we want to do is design a plan around supporting time to collaborate, making sure that we have teachers that can provide professional development embedded in the school day. That is going to answer all 5 components of the QComp program, but really focusing just on the dollar amount of the $169 per student in state aid. And so we would not be bringing anything to the public or that would be an unfunded levy to the public. That's not dollars that we're pursuing in this. But we, from an administrative standpoint, from a union standpoint, just feel like this could really be a good opportunity to strengthen the work that we're doing and improve instruction to better meet the needs of our students. Would you like to add anything?
I think you did a very nice job.
Why, thank you.
And I'm not sure how high level mine can be.
All right, okay. So we just want to be able to answer any questions that you have at this time, and just wanted to make sure that you're okay with us moving forward in a process to, which would, as the timeline indicated, lead to a vote by the teachers in the district that then we would bring to you, and you would need to approve the plan later on this year.
Dr. McKenzie? Yes, Mr. Chapman.
I'm going to plead ignorance on QComp right out of the gate. I've heard the term, I know little bits and pieces here and there, but what of these things on slide or page 64, what is QComp, the 5 bullet points? Can you give me a little more in terms of nuts and bolts and detail of how this is, going to improve the district or improve whether it's morale or how we do things or, all of the above? I'd like a little more detail, I guess.
And from both sides, from the Teachers Association
Yeah.
and from administration, so.
Go ahead, start filling in.
Okay, career ladder and advancement options. This is really about teachers retaining their primary role in the classroom, but having the opportunity to bring their expertise into helping their teams in collaborating and actually adjusting their instruction to meet student needs. Job-embedded professional development is ongoing and it's site-based, and it's built around supporting the plan at the building level in order to get the desired results that they're after. And so data decision-making processes in terms of what initial training we're doing right now, this just broadens that training to make sure that every team has a trained person that is part of those conversations, so that that we can just be very responsive with the professional development needs. We have our teacher evaluation system. At the time QComp was originally brought forward from the legislature, that was very new in its infancy stage. We have an observation system using our class observations, and so part of this would be increasing the frequency of feedback, which research says is very important in order for teachers to be able to improve on their instruction, and so we would be able to increase frequency of feedback. Performance pay looks at student-wide achievement gains, and that is looking at student learning goals and longitudinal student engagement data that is part of our teacher evaluation plan. And then the final one is alternative salary schedule, and you can look at objective evaluation processes that we have right now, feedback on they look at 3 different areas. They look at increasing in your knowledge in your professional area. Could be one way that you have, that you adjust your alternative pay. More pay for teachers that have high demand areas or directly tied to student outcomes. And quite frankly, that is the one that we've seen some innovation in how districts have approached that in order to make sure that the collaborative structure and working together remains the priority, because that's tied to broader results connected for student outcomes.
Dr. McKenzie, the Teachers Association,
Well,
must be in favor of this. Why?
Well, I would say, first of all, a little history. We looked at this about 10, 12 years ago, back when everyone was looking at it. And we came up with a preliminary plan that both sides agreed to, but it kind of fell apart at that point. And since then, it's been kind of here nor there. In the meantime, however, the legislature took many of the pieces of QComp and put them into the teacher evaluation statute that was passed 3 years ago. So this last year, we kind of looked at it and said, hey, we've got none of this money, and we're doing a lot of the work from the original QComp statute. So let's take a look at how much overlap there is, what's left over, and if it's reasonable for us to finish the missing pieces of QComp to move forward with it. I brought it to my leadership, and they're fine with it. I have to tell you, we're going a little bit different route than most people, because we're not getting any stipend out of this. As opposed to 12 years ago, each teacher was going to get $2,600 for doing the QComp. We're justifying that in 2 main ways. The first is, a lot of it is really overlap. We're already doing PLCs. We're not doing them as robustly as we should be, but we're already doing them. We're doing a lot of the pieces already. So it's, 12 years ago, it was a ton of extra work, so it really did require extra money to justify it. Now it's going to be some extra work, but not a ton. And what we're getting in exchange is some of the pieces that we've been kind of pushing for quite a while. More staff development, more time to collaborate, more time to look at we collect all this data, we don't have every time to use it. So all of those pieces are going to make our jobs, frankly, to some extent easier, but if not easier, at least higher quality. And so we feel comfortable with it. I mean, we're not there yet. I mean, we don't have a finished plan. I've got no reason to think we're not going to get a finished plan, but we certainly have my leadership at any rate behind it, and we'll see. The general membership, all they know is that we're starting the process and we're looking at it.
On our board, we have 4 current or former educators, And then there is Mr. Mullen, Mr. Chapman, and me. I know about Q-Comp because I'm on the 916 board, and we have had lengthy discussions, and we've approved a Q-Comp plan. Mr. Chapman asked questions, so that leaves you, Mr. Mullen. Do you?
I'm learning more, no.
Okay, do you have any questions, or are you comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable.
Very good.
I guess one thing I just want to add is that instrumental to this conversation, this work, is teaching and learning team, our peer reviewers, Dr. Kasmachek in terms of sustainability of anything we put together, and then Linda Gores making sure that everything we do is fitting with what we are responsible for in our contract. So it definitely is going to be a very collaborative effort moving forward.
Well, I applaud the effort.
So you're not seeking the stipend for the educators. That is novel.
We are altruistic.
Going to generate about how much are the costs that you are anticipating for making the changes and the adjustments that you want to make for teacher collaboration and professional development?
Those are the things that we're going to bring back to you in March. I think we just really want to honor and make sure that we really bring this to the committee. The committee's first meeting is this Wednesday, and we want to make sure that we don't speak out of turn in terms of how those details are going to be sorted out.
But I'm guessing it's not going to be anywhere near 1.3 million, right?
Oh, no, it's not going to be challenging to spend.
So is it going to revert, the balance going to revert to the general fund?
There will be no balance.
No balance, huh? Oh,
I would
okay.
anticipate no balance. I mean, there might be a little fudge factor, but.
Really? Okay.
Very good, Ms. Newmaster.
I'm just going to say, I was there the first time around as it was discussed endlessly as its pros and cons, and I think most people were like, oh, when it was like a deflated balloon. But I can see with all the initiatives and things that people need to work on professionally and need support for, that this would be a great way to somehow enable teachers to be able to better control and do what they do. And actually have some money so that you're not taking daycare extra to stay later to work on whatever is the current initiative.
Very good. And
It looks like a good possibility.
any other comments or questions?
Yep, a
Mr.
couple.
Wilson?
Back on what is this slide right here. How will your plan meet the last two tenants there of QComp? You're not doling out the staff development.
We're getting $3.
Okay.
That's-
I mean,
that's how
seriously,
the performance pay.
they're going to want to see some sort of form of alternative to the existing salary schedule. They're going to want to see something in the way of performance pay, more than $3 off.
No.
Wager? No?
Well, that's hard to say.
Yeah.
I was talking with Dr. Lovett earlier today in our meeting, and there really is as many different QComp plans.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, they're so all over the spectrum out there.
It's user defined. The
But
trick
there-
is getting it approved by MDE, you know.
There are plans out there, most recently Minneapolis, that has $3 on the 3 different performance pay areas. So literally we'll make $3 if we.
Okay.
But the gain is the professional development.
Sure,
and support.
I understand that, yeah.
I think a big challenge for us is going to be that this is one piece of the puzzle. $1.3 million does not go very far, and it's just trying to make sure that people have an understanding of the targeted supports that we want to put into place, and making sure that we really involve people in the drafts that eventually goes out to the sites.
Yeah, well, considering this was conceived during that era of, they wanted public salary schedules gone entirely, you know, that's quite a paradigm shift to come down to where they're willing to accept $3.
There are a number of unique and creative ways that people have gotten the plans approved. So we're going
But
to
I
take a
think
look at
it's
it.
grounded in research that the collaboration and leaning into each other's strengths and being open to looking how other people are doing something in order to improve on yourself, there's gold in that. And that research wasn't around as much, or wasn't being looked at in 2000.
I'm not taking issue with that portion of it at all, sir. I'm just saying when my district went through this, I mean, they were holding it, to the letter to meet each one of those. Like you say, if they're willing to settle for that meager amount, great. And they weren't so forgiving in the past.
All right, any other questions? Thank you very much. Before we move on.
Happy birthday.
Yep.
I won't sing to you, but we appreciate you.
We're all singing silently. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I want to go back to provide one piece of information on the superintendent recruitment and selection process. After the night of our MSBA training, someone had asked me, well, what did we spend on an outside consultant firm when we recruited Dr. Lovett? I sent an email to Dr. Kazmierczak. He responded immediately. He said the firm was Hazard Atea. We spent just over $21,000 total, and about a little over $6,000 of that was in expenses. They did a lot of travel, but that was a full service. We had them do everything. So just to follow up on that and to thank Dr. Kazmierczak for getting that information to me. So now we will turn to item B5 on the agenda, overview of timelines for potential 2017 renewal referendum. And I think, Dr. Lovett, you said that for the next items, you're just going to open it up for questions.
That is correct. Dr. Kazmierczak will sit here for the two items, and then Tim will come and join us for the last two. So you've had the materials. Dr. Kazmierczak has presented the materials to our Finance Advisory Committee last week. And would you like to say anything in summary before we begin?
I could. I hope I didn't do that on your slide. It's slowly in.
That would take more time.
I think it would be important for us to go through this information at some point. I don't know that it's critical that we do it today. So, so if I wanted to show you, what does it boil down to? A couple slides. I'll take just a couple minutes. Statewide election trends. I think this is an important slide to be aware of, and that's on page. What is that? Page 61? Is that doesn't make sense? 75. Okay. So. There's a slide number, but I think it's buried by the numbers. Oh, this is a slide number. It's just a big PowerPoint, one big file. So anyway, I just want to point out next year is so November of 17. November of 17 is like the blue columns on this graphic. So what that means is that the years where it's blue, the success rate was considerably higher than the other years. The yellow is the gubernatorial election years, and then the red is presidential election years. And this year, the percentage of the success rate was 71%. The graphic should be updated, but so that fell in line with others. So that's just something to be aware of. So there may be strategic reasons why we would pursue renewal in November of 17. Doing it in November of 17 is also a year earlier, so that if something were to happen and it wouldn't pass, we'd have another crack at it the following year. And that's a sound strategy to take going into a renewal of such an important amount of our revenue. And another thing, just to point out, the renewal operating levy questions that are renewals, straight renewals, have been very, very successful in the recent years. Of 99 questions on ballots in the last 5 years, 98 of those have passed. Just this month, earlier this month, there were 14 renewals during a presidential election year, very contentious presidential election year, and all 14 of them passed. So I share this not because we should be complacent, but because we should be fully aware of the context we're living in, and in November of 17, we approach this the right way. We should be optimistic about our chances. And then, again, I won't go through all this tonight. We can go through it another time. Unless you have questions, I'll come back. But the other thing I just wanted to point out was the tax impact. On this slide, the tax impact, this was prepared by Ehlers and Associates, our financial advisor. They made two key assumptions. One, that our enrollment would increase by 1% each year, and that our property values would go up 2.5% each year. Both are probably a little conservative estimates. So the way operating levy renewal works, and ours has an automatic increase for inflation. The way a renewal works is it locks in on the previous year, so the previous year's amount goes on the ballot without any inflationary increase. So if you move the same amount forward from one year to the next, but then you increase property values, just that alone causes overall, the individual taxpayer to pay a little bit less on their tax bill. So that's why this is a negative tax impact. We don't want to oversell that, but it's a good thing. We certainly want to be. We want to speak about tax impact, and we will, and we're required to. But the good thing is that we aren't going to see a significant tax increase, assuming we just go for a straight renewal. There would be some risk in going beyond that we can talk about, but we have time to do that. So, and then in your materials, there's a timeline. Election day is November 7th, 2017. And there are some steps that need to occur before then, quite a few steps. The board, the last day for the board to adopt a resolution called for the election is in late August. So that's a key date. And there are other key dates leading up to that as well. So in the spirit of moving things along, I'll stop there and just take any questions, and then we'll probably revisit this again perhaps in January or February or whatever works for the agenda.
Yeah, just as an observation, I think the question is, this is very well done and very thorough. The question is, when do you want this do we want this either at December or January or February? When do we want this presentation or one like it to be on television and to get in the news?
We're doing the survey in April.
Yes.
Survey results in May. What would your recommendation be?
I don't know that we've landed on that. One thing I think we should do is unless the board has concerns, I think we should continue our work with Springstead and begin working closely with them so that we're in the queue for a survey and we have that relationship, that advising relationship.
They did excellent survey process for us before.
They've been right on the nose the last two times, and that's so. And I think I'd ask them about that too, because rather than having us decide, I'd like to start that relationship with them and have conversations with them about how to approach it.
Yeah, Mr. Mullins.
What was the cost associated with that last time? For that number?
I don't either.
That would be the only thing for me. I'd like to understand the cost. I understand they do great work. I understand that, but I would like to know the cost of where it's at so that we can, as we're working through those numbers, budget-wise, we
Excellent.
Make sure that we're thinking through that.
Excellent.
So we do have a somewhat of a rough timeline from Ehlers. A lot of what you see up here is, or not Ehlers, from Springstead. We work with Ehlers, we work with Springstead. From Springstead, I suspect that if we were to ask specifically about when we would speak with the board about this, I don't think there's a rush to do it in December. I think January probably makes some sense, given that we'll likely be discussing the budget at that time, so we can have a broader finance update, of which this would make a lot of sense to wrap it into that discussion. So that would be what I would recommend. February might be pushing it a little bit too late if we want to get moving on some things in March. But January seems like a comfortable time frame.
One thing we as a board will be asked to do, we'll be given three options. We can either decide, well, we're not going to renew our levy, which is, it's just like, let's just kill the district. What's the percentage of our budget that comes from levy referendum dollars? To me, that is a no-go. Yeah. The other option would be to renew the operating levy at its current rate. The other would be to increase it. And I think the smartest thing we did last time we voted on the levy was included an inflationary increase factor in the levy. And it's been increasing with inflation as we've moved forward. And, you know, my sense now, and I'll wait for the full presentation, is we're not going to need an increase. I think we can do just fine with a renewal. Plus, when you look at the approval percentages of levy renewals versus any levy increase, which is going to increase taxpayers' payouts, you get a much higher percentage approval rating on street renewals.
And if you look at our amount is pushing 2,000 per pupil if you include all the different variables. The voter approved portion is at 1,554. So our advisor is suggesting that if at this point that's what they would estimate the amount to be, at 1,554. There's just not a lot of logic in pushing that higher than where it's at because we'd be pushing up against a state cap anyway. So to not be able to have that as a straight renewal, it doesn't seem like it would be worth any kind of risk. And if you're wondering about what sort of revenue it means for us, it's in your presentation. The voter approved portion is 13.7 million. The board, you actually approve a portion of our operating levy, but it's through the regular operating levy that you'll be, or the tax levy that you'll be approving in a couple weeks. And when that time comes, I'll be sure to point out that amount. It's $424 per pupil. It's assumed school districts move that forward and approve it, and almost all do. So.
Yes, Mr. Chapman, and then Mr. Wilson.
Just two questions, Wayne. In terms of that 1978 number, is that the 1554 that was approved by the voters with the inflation factor built in, or where are we arriving at?
1554 plus $424 per pupil that is part of our regular annual tax levy that the board approves every December. So it's local optional revenue. And this is where we're getting.
I don't think he was asking that. Were you asking that? I
Well,
thought
he
you
was
were.
asking
Yes,
where the
I arrived at
1978.
Yeah, the 1978, I was
That's
curious
how I
where we,
Yep.
Oh, I thought he was talking about.
It's 1554 plus 424.
right, I understand that.
424 is, there were significant statutory changes in the last, maybe about 3 sessions ago. So the north branches of the world couldn't pass. The board was able to levy $424 per pupil to help offset the fact that they couldn't, their voters wouldn't approve.
But are those, that 424, I know I started asking this question one other meeting, that's not new money, correct? I mean, in other words, because we went to the voters for 1554, but now we're looking at 1978, and I'm just curious.
We'd be going to the voters for 1554.
But we went to 1554 before, so back 7 years.
And there are also a very important pupil accounting change. So we are now basing this on adjusted pupil units rather than marginal cost pupil units. And that was a significant change because it actually it impacted every school district in the state. Your operating levy either went up or down depending on, it depended on how many of your resident students were attending versus how many were out. So if you were a net loser in terms of your students, your operating levy actually went down. I think I have that right. If you gained students, other way around, if you gained students, the opposite would happen. So the state made an adjustment so that everybody was held harmless. Nobody had a windfall, and nobody lost anything when the pupil units were changed. So it's complicated as to how we got to where we are today when compared to what was approved back in 2011. 2011, we approved 1580.
Okay,
and we're actually asking for less than that. But since that time, there have been some significant changes at the legislature. So in the end, we'll be requesting about the same amount.
Because I could see where, and I was confused there too, where somebody would look at that and go, well, isn't the district, garnering more money, asking for more money this time around than saying that it's...
Well, and that'll be a key message that we get out there. Yep.
All right, Mr. Wilson, did you have a question, or has that been answered?
No, it has not. This is, in hockey parlance, a deflection off of Wayne to Sarah to set up a give and go.
What?
It's going to go from Wayne to Sarah, and mainly Sarah's going to answer and then come back to Wayne. But with, back on QCOM, the 1.3 million going to go for staff development. Would that free up any existing staff development funds?
We have gaps right now in terms of what we're trying to do, so this is going to be a way to better deliver on what the expectations are in the educator evaluation system,
Okay.
that we need to build capacity for people to better use data to inform their instruction. And so this is a gap that we're trying to fill. It isn't
Okay.
going to replace it.
So you're not using it to fund new staff development initiatives? I mean, there will be some, for sure,
Yeah, this is a staff, staff development
but
initiative.
you're going to fill up needs
Yes,
that are there that are unfunded?
yes.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Kimball, a while ago, I thought you had a question?
Yeah, well, I don't know, I'm a little confused on this, give and go.
From Wayne to Sarah, back to Wayne, he shoots.
We're not, if QComp happens, it certainly is to fund, I would think, new initiatives in professional development that especially teachers and the teaching and learning staff have wanted to do, and we knew that it would benefit our instruction to do. But with our current professional development budget, it just wasn't in the works. So it's not taking the place of anything, it's not funding old wanted things, it's going to provide extra opportunities for collaboration and right, teacher.
We are complimented at MDE for the work we're doing in our educator evaluation system and the alignment of all of the components with 3 peer reviewers. And so another peer reviewer is going to provide additional, more frequent feedback to staff. So it's not like we're creating a whole new initiative, we're just trying to make sure to provide the right supports that it takes to help people improve on what they're doing, and they're craving that. We had some training that we brought in. It would take us 3 years to roll out that training to get it to everybody, whereas having some additional supports in that area will get everybody supports at the level that they need it at. So it's strengthening the current work. Wayne, do you want to add anything to that?
The PLC that was mentioned earlier, the concept of the PLCs and providing proper support there, it's a key element as well. That isn't new, it's just not funded, and we aren't able to do it as well as we could with that additional one.
When you developed the levy number, 1554, were you anticipating funding some of the special
No, this is, I mean, the 1554 is what, it's what it is, and it's what it will be that next year. I mean, it was as simple as that. It was a simple calculation from, well, it's not a simple calculation, but from the time we approved that 1580 figure to when we renew, it's just an annual. If the legislature hadn't changed anything, it would have simply been 1580 plus inflation, plus inflation.
Let me restate it
plus
then.
Inflation, plus inflation. That's how the numbers are right now.
With the infusion of QCOM money, that's not going to free up any money in the referendum, is it?
No. What it does is, and I don't have a great graphic to show this, but if we were to show White Bear Lakes revenue, so just pretend this is what this is showing. White Bear Lakes revenue would likely be below the line. The average metro district would be on the upper end of the line, going back to Jim Eichman's presentation. We were talking about the amount of revenue we get versus other metro districts. One of the things that creates the gap from district to district is different funding sources. One of those is QComp. We don't have QComp. So that gap would narrow a little bit in terms of how much we get compared to other metro districts.
Okay.
Questions, Mr. Kimball?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the, like, So just to clarify, and I think maybe everybody knows, we've been getting the 424.
Right.
We just continue to get that. So in the levy, no one's going to see the 1978. They're only going to see the 1554.
Correct.
They're not going to see anything about the 424.
Correct.
On the ballot.
Yep, and if the legislature hadn't changed it, on the ballot would be the 1978, but the legislature changed it. So that the boards can just do that 424. It doesn't show up on the ballot. What will show on the ballot is the 1554.
Any other questions? And we will have this back before us in a more comprehensive way in January. I like Dr. Kazmierczak's suggestion of combining that with the presentation on the amended budget. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Kazmierczak. We will turn to our second and the last agenda item, B6. I'm getting excited here. Discussion on opportunity to partner with other school districts on equity policy. Which one of you, Dr. Lovett?
It's my turn to be brief. Over the past couple of months, we've been providing some information to you, and I'll make 3 points. Education in the United States is a state responsibility. The Minnesota Constitution provides that the stability of a Republican form of government, depending mainly on the intelligence of the people, it shall be the duty of the legislature to establish a general and uniform system of public schools. This notion of what the general and uniform system of public schools is the standard. Last year, a court case that's described in your materials challenged the current state system, naming the state as a defendant and certain school districts as defendants, arguing that given the achievement gaps and racial disparities, the current system is not meeting that constitutional standard. And as a remedy recommended, rather than having school districts, we have a major metropolitan school district that would significantly change how things are done. School superintendents, through particularly AMSD, have had conversations with their school boards and with one another. How should we respond? Should we intervene in the court case? Should we stand by the wayside, or should we do something else? And over the past few months, we agreed that the court case, the underlying concerns, achievement gaps, racial disparities, are real, and the current system is not resolving those. We ought not to be challenging the court case. We don't want to be there. And we don't want to stay on the sidelines. We really need to be part of whatever solution it comes up. And so a group of superintendents, and Wayne and I have been involved, Sarah, Tim, everybody on the team has been involved in some of the conversations. A number of cabinet members have gone to presentations that have been made. Believe that we should be part of this collaborative response. The document describes the collaborative response and the cost. The groups of districts that had already committed put out a request for proposals, received 4 proposals, and after these materials were sent out, I actually heard from John Schultz from Hopkins, who's informally coordinating this, that a selection has been made of a group that Paula Forbes and Associates is involved in, and we'll hear more about that at the AMSD meeting on this Friday. The question, thus far what we've done is we've said that we want to be involved in the conversation. Many school districts, probably 2/3 of the metropolitan school districts, have informally at least committed to paying a share of the cost. And the share of the cost, the $10,000 share of the cost, has been estimated based on 30 school districts participating, and the total cost of this project overall would be about $300,000. So that's how the $10,000 amount has come up. So we're really opening the conversation with you, and we don't need to make a decision tonight, but we're interested in your points of view and any additional information that you'd want us to provide to you.
Mr. Chapman?
I was under for some reason, and I probably totally misinterpreted, which could very well be the case, but I was thinking that this was going to be monies put forth and effort put forth to challenge that court ruling. If it's not, and the court ruling proceeds and we get an adverse judgment, I'm not sure, I'm not connecting the dots. At what forum would this alternative plan be introduced? I'm not sure I quite understand or comprehend. If we're not going to be involved in the court process, and the court process goes against the districts, to me it seems like it'd be a moot point at that point to have an alternative plan. So there's something I'm not grasping here.
Try that one, and do you want to do that? No, I'll take it correct.
Okay, I think benefit for school districts to get involved, benefit is, if we just think about a very practical benefit, it's to help inform legislation. It's to help inform policy. So this court case will progress. There will be an outcome. The collective work of metropolitan school districts might very well inform the outcome of the case through, it's in one of the documents, the amicus brief, and maybe Janet can talk a little bit about what that means. But basically, we would be providing an opinion of a collection of school districts would provide an opinion. We would potentially, well, yeah, we're not named in the suit. The state of Minnesota is, but we're all going to be impacted by whatever comes out of it. And this is a way of being proactive, to be at the table and come up with potential solutions that might be looked upon very favorably by a judge. And say, oh, Minnesota, you do have your achievement gap data is horrendous, but you have a well-intentioned group of leaders who are trying to address this.
It seems like it would be more to affect the remedy. And with Brown versus Board of Education back in the 1950s, the forced remedy was busing. You know, if you have schools, all black schools, all white schools, you have to bus the kids to even it out. And I think, one of the potential remedies based on this court case is, well, let's just form one single metro-wide school district. And I think what this group is trying to do is to put forth other remedies, other potential remedies to deal with these inequalities, which are primarily, this is not deliberate school desegregation anymore. This is more segregation in schools based on racially isolated neighborhoods. People seem to be moving into neighborhoods with people who look like them, and then they go to their neighborhood schools, and that's where we're, I think, developing a lot of these racial disparities in our schools.
So we are going to try to some extent then behind the scenes influence the case, the way it sounds, the outcome of the case, if a ruling comes down adverse to us, to try and mitigate the damage, so to speak. And if nothing else, then to influence the legislature, I would guess, then to take action to remedy whatever damage that case may inflict.
So one of the meetings we attended, yes, you're right on. One of the meetings we attended, one of the presenters talked about the fact that if there is no voice, decisions are going to be made without educators having a voice in the outcome. This is a way for educators to have a voice. Whether or not it has a positive impact on the result, we'll have to wait to see. But the odds are that it would, because it's a large group of metropolitan school districts who would definitely be impacted by whatever the outcome. So for those folks to be coming together to try and do something in a proactive way, we think would be viewed very favorably, and might not be exact. There are challenges with that too, because we're not Matamidi, we're not Minnetonka. There are differences of opinion on open enrollment, for example. There are all kinds of inherent issues with open enrollment, which is a statewide policy. There are winners and losers in that particular thing. So something may very well change with open enrollment. Well, if it does, we want to make sure we're part of policy development and recommendations that might go to the legislature.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, now the dots are, I comprehend where you're coming from.
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I just want to be clear about a couple things. Has the Cruz-Guzman group already won the case, and now we're really just talking about structuring and settlement?
They have not won the case, no. It
Okay.
hasn't, I mean,
All right.
progressed.
Now, the whole idea of the single metropolitan school board, to me, smacks of a giant integration district, like we have now in several different pockets around the Twin Cities. So if that's the case, could a White Bear student say, well, gee, I'd like to attend Minnetonka? And then it would be incumbent upon the district of residence to provide transportation to and from the selected school for that student. Is that pretty much
Could be,
what it's going to be like? Or
yeah, transportation could become a huge cost district-wide. Yeah.
I certainly agree with what Dr. Kazmierczak said, that we need to have the voice of educators as this case moves forward. And I think, and from what I understand, the entire cabinet supports White Bear's involvement in this group. Is that the case? Yeah.
May I clarify my comment about Matamina and Minnetonka? I chose those two school districts because they are huge net gainers in open enrollment, and there are there's a certain demographic that chooses to attend, generally, that tends to leave other school districts. Other school districts are impacted in a different way. So there are very different impacts with this one state statute, and that might be one area, that the obvious one that this case tries to hone in on and make some changes to it.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is to fight the Guzman case, but I mean, the purpose of this collaboration, as stated, is to pool the resources and come up with a multi-district plan to deal with the achievement gap. I mean, that's the big picture thing. And then, by the way, this other thing's going on, and if we do this, then we have more leverage or ammunition to fight in court, saying we're already doing this, this, and this, and this. But have someone coordinating the efforts instead of each district trying to go out on their own, right?
Right. And we may learn a great deal from other districts as we deal with our own issues internally, and other districts will learn from us.
Matamina and Minnetonka are in.
They are.
But that's also then a big, that's a challenge, because I think maybe, I forget the term you used, movement to regional areas of people of like color is one thing, but maybe a bigger thing is the open enrollment, that, white kids on the border of Robbinsdale or whatever are all enrolled in Minnetonka or whatever's next, Edina. And, they're not going to want to stop that, but we might, So, I mean, I think it's going to be a real challenge. And also, for so many years, we've all been trying to do things to stop the achievement gap, and we've been unsuccessful. So, I mean, at some point, someone is going to do something because we're not doing it. And so I hope that this is a real thing and not just a fighting a court case to keep the status quo thing.
No, it's absolutely not that.
Ms. Newmaster.
The only thing that I guess just disturbs me a little bit is about you don't want people to realize you're joining this. This is intervening district. You could be insulated by not naming names of groups that have joined this.
We aren't an intervening district. We would be the number 2 on that list, 1, 2, 3. We would be in the monitor list. We would not be a party to the case.
To the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And we would not try and hide that from
No,
our...
absolutely not.
Okay, because that would disturb me.
No, so we're not talking about, we're looking at the talking point in the document that looks like this. There's under number 4, respective suburban metropolitan school districts have 3 primary options, and then it spells it out: take no action, monitor, and intervention. Intervention is where Marge was talking about. Am I in the right spot, Marge? And then, yep. And that, but we're talking about too, where our involvement is much greater than taking no action, and it isn't becoming a party to the suit.
Mr. Chapman?
I recall this is, I don't see it here, I know it's in here, this is going to be a joint powers entity, correct?
The joint powers arrangement is for the, well, how would we describe the AMSD stepping forward to be the fiscal host? That's the only formal, you know, other than the collection of the districts that are committing to helping to offset the costs of the consultant who's going to work with the member districts.
Well, any other discussion? Is there a general sense that it would be a good idea to move forward with this?
To monitor status, yeah.
Yep, monitor status. Looks like the general sense is yes.
Recognizing that there would be likely a one-time cost or a cumulative cost of roughly $10,000, which is roughly the cost of our participation in AMSD annually. Okay,
that's up to. That's the up to amount.
Yeah, depending on the number of districts.
I'd already.
Yeah.
But this would mean that Wayne and I would let the group know that we're in as a full partner. Right now, we're in as a we're interested in as thought partners and conversation partners, but not in as a full partner. So that would change our status, and we'd be joining roughly 30 other districts. So Wayne is right, it could be less than this. But thank you to Wayne and all the members of Cabinet who've been involved in the conversation. It's been one of the elements of our equity work that we continue to update you on.
Yeah,
Can I
Mr.
ask
Chapman.
one last question?
Please.
That is, if well, not the litigation, but I mean, if the involvement in this group surpasses what is estimated, is there a provision going to be in this agreement or whatever that we're entering with these other districts that they will assess us? I assume so.
I think what we need to do is look at what the final proposal was from the consultant, because the consultants were going to be defining some of their work. So we're buying something. We're not providing a blank check. So the consultant that has been selected by the leadership group that was identified on one of these sheets, they've determined that was the best proposal for the estimate that we had put forward. We haven't heard anything different that it needs to be more than that. So it's a fixed term. I suppose if something happens down the road, we would certainly come back to you and talk about what happened that was unanticipated.
But we're not tied to an automatic cost overrun assessment?
No.
Right.
Okay.
At this point, a lot of this is handshake, not contract. But it was important for the districts generally to know who would be willing to commit. Otherwise, this doesn't work. Otherwise, we'd have small groups of districts. And the fact that AMSD, for which George is our official representative, concluded that it was in AMSD's interest to be the fiscal host is an important degree of credibility within AMSD. But this group will not exclusively be AMSD districts. That is, the invitation is open to districts outside of AMSD to participate as well. We will have an update on Friday at the AMSD meeting, so we'll be able to give you one.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dr. Kazmierczak, Dr. Lovett. Our last agenda item, B7, discussion on primary election change. We originally had scheduled Joseph Mansky to be with us tonight. He's the Director of Elections for Ramsey County, but once we moved this to the very end of the agenda, we thought it would be cruel and unusual, an Eighth Amendment violation to force him to be here, so we just would like to rely on Mr. Moore and perhaps Dr. Kazmierczak to discuss the recommendation of Mr. Mansky.
So as I, as I continue to grow and learn in my role, I met with Mr. Mansky prior to the elections this past month for presidential elections, just to meet with him and face-to-face, and as he prepped me as to what needs to happen for the elections, then he brought up the fact, has your district decided if they're going to remove or no longer participate in the primary election? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll find out. So I did, and Dr. Kazmachek had the letter that he had written as of last year, and just reminded me that if we did want to take action to no longer participate in the primary, which we're one of the few districts in Ramsey County that do, the only one, since I believe the last time his letter stated we had a very low turnout rate, 1% to 2%, I think. And he just wanted to remind me that a decision had to be made prior to April.
And the total cost? It was $30,000 to put it on the last time we had,
Correct.
last and only time we ran a primary.
Yeah.
And only 626 voters turned out. Any discussion on this? We don't need to make a decision until April, but Mr. Mullen.
Do we know what a recount election costs? If we have an election, what the trigger would be for a recount?
I do.
Because I'm going to tell you, I'm opposed to, I think that we should stick with the primary. I think what it does is it lowers it lessens the amount of people that are running. I think it lessens the fact that I think we're going to have more opportunity for a recount election, which I think is going to cost us more money in the long term. So I would be opposed to us switching the system, just to be public and be open about it. I think the system works, and we should roll with it.
Ms. Fahey and then Mr. Chapman.
When I first looked at this, I kind of said, okay, I don't get it, because there's a provision in place if there's more than twice the number of people running, then a primary is run. And what I'd like to find out from the other districts is why they've dropped the primary, because if we saw, like in Stillwater, with the decision the board made, people came out of the woodwork to run for that. And I don't understand. You can't control the number of people that file to be a school board candidate.
It's only
correct?
$1 or $2.
So it's $2.
Yeah, $2.
And I don't know. I thought primaries were part of our election process, and actually I was surprised to find out that you can make that decision that no, we will not have a primary, since there's already a provision there that a primary is not held if there's less than twice the number of open seats. So our next school board election would be, there's 4 open seats, I believe.
Right, next fall.
So you would only run a primary if there were 9 or more people that filed.
That's right.
So I thought primary elections were part of our process to narrow the candidates for the general election.
And that's the effect of it.
Yes.
Yep.
It's part of ours, our process, but not genuinely, it's not.
The other factor that it influences is the time of filing. That is, districts with a primary election have a much earlier filing period than districts without a primary.
Mr. Chapman, you had your hand up earlier.
So, Tim, what would be the cost of, what's the downside if we continue status quo, continue what we've been doing? Is there an implication here that the district is going to have to start taking on those costs and the county's going to drop paying for that?
We are paying for that.
Oh, we are paying
That's
for
our
that.
$30,000.
So why is the county so concerned about
I think
we're paying the bill?
From my take from meeting with him, it was more just a generally, because he had such a low turnout, his recommendation would be to save your money and just do the fall general election. He said, we're happy to continue to do it. But just with the
And
low
they have to have
turnout.
election judges and all the polling places and set up for votes. They do have their own.
My take from my meeting with him, we only met for like 25 minutes, but this is just a brief part of it, but it was just a general comment to reference that letter and just remind me of the time. So,
okay.
And I can email tomorrow Don and ask him about your question in regards to the recount cost.
Well, because there's a trigger in the state statute, and I'm not trying to jump in there, and please excuse me. There's a trigger in the state statute, right, that says that if it's if it's 0.5% of 1 point, or it's half a percent, that it triggers an automatic recount, which we would have to pay for then. If you put 25 people that are all running through to a general election, right, the likelihood is pretty high that we're going to start triggering recounts, and we're going to have to start paying for those.
But a recount with only 626 voters could be a real quick one.
I respectfully understand that. I'm just saying that, I just think the system works, and it's meant to do what it's doing, and we should continue on with that pathway.
Mr. Wilson, and then Ms.
I guess the way our seats are structured, we'll always have off-year elections for board members, correct?
That's what we have done just to escape the insanity of having elections in either Senate or presidential years.
Well, now that our terms are set, it'll always repeat, so
Yep,
it's always...
that's the way it is now, yes, unless
Okay.
we made a change.
So, all right. That said, then, because I was going to say, he's asking us to make a general conclusion based on, an off-year election when there aren't going, and there wasn't anything on the ballot but school board, right? As I recall.
Right.
Yeah.
Depends on where you were. Some
Well, that's true.
city council.
Yeah. Yep, that's true.
We were at the same time as the city
Yeah,
council.
my ward, yeah, there was only
I'm up in the
only
township,
board
we just had
members
school board.
listed. So,
Next
well,
year, next year, we'll have the
that's-
operating on the ballot.
yeah.
And the mayor will be on the ballot for White Bear, and I think it's the even number, so it'd be 2 and 4.
That's the general.
And the
That's
more,
the general election.
my point is, you don't want to get into making, a decision based on an artificially low number. I mean, the more candidates that are on the ballot for other offices, the bigger the turnout's going to be, and then you won't necessarily have the 626, It'll typically still be a lot lower than a general election, but still the numbers will be there. With all that said, I will just echo my support for what Ellen said. I think it's a good system. You want to really have a process where you can eliminate people just, coming off the street and, paying their $2 and filing. You'd like to see some quality, I would hope, to the candidates that do file and run for a board seat. So I'd say maintain it.
Ms. Newmaster.
And I know we're not voting on it now, but that's kind of my impression too. And I have one question. It seems to me that this was the first time ever White Bear triggered it. So it's not like it's a cost to every single school board election. It's very unusual, and I think it's there for a reason.
Mr. Kimball.
I want to just research it more. It's there, but I wouldn't argue that if it's there for a good reason. It's there for a reason. But sometimes things aren't a good idea, and I guess I hear us sometimes talking about we don't want to spend $8,000 on this or $10,000 on that, but we're willing to spend $30,000 on what I think is not, just right now, but I just don't know enough. I just don't know that I think it's still a democratic process. If someone's a horrible fly-by-night person, no one's going to vote for them. So, I think that we have to
We just had a presidential election.
Well, unless they are a lot of... Anyway, we won't go there, but I guess I'd rather keep an open mind to it, and I wonder why we would be, maybe we're better than the rest, but why would we be the only district in the whole Twin Cities area to decide that it's important to have this? Do we know something they don't? And there's other offices that don't have primaries also. It's not an automatic, election thing anymore. We just happen to have hung on to it.
Well, maybe before, we don't have to make a decision on this until April. Maybe in the meantime, we can either individually or whatnot do some research on pros and cons of having a primary election and then revisit it in another work study before April. How about that? Because I agree with you. I should have before tonight. I knew this was going to be on the agenda. Did some research. What are the pros? What are the cons? There's got to be cons other than it costs $30,000.
And there's another time aids and maybe we bring some aids in to answer
Yeah.
some questions too,
Yep.
so.
Yes, who is next? Mr. Chapman?
To me, one of the cons would be, I mean, when you're talking only 1 to 2% turnout already at 626 votes, if you get a whole bunch of candidates, you could delete that vote down to not all that many.
Well, and that's what,
The larger somebody's extended family is that lives in the
well,
area
that's what
could end
Mr.
up
Mullin was
carrying
suggesting,
a
that, you
seat.
know, if you have 4 votes for this person, 4 votes for that,
Yeah.
that might trigger a recount, so.
Or recount or not, I mean, you could
Yeah.
just have seats going to people that get, you know,
That have
20
big-
votes,
big
30
families.
votes out of how many thousand residents, you know. That's my concern, is that it just gets could potentially get so diluted as far as how the candidates are chosen.
Yes, Ms.
Yeah, this
Fahey.
is an aside, but in Australia, if you don't vote, you get fined because it's a responsibility, and that pays for the elections. So, I'm kind of and I understand it was a primary, but 600, 1 to 2% of people coming out to vote as a candidate but it concerns me.
Well,
Anyway, that was my little aside.
in the
It's- what
voter's
time is
defense,
it?
I mean, it was not broadcast heavily in the White Bear Press and the media that, oh, we've got this primary election today. So I can see why fewer turned out. Yes.
So for me, I love the numbers, and I love to watch the returns and watch how the election percentages go. I just do. But one of the fascinating things to me is in presidential years, typically Minnesota votes 80 to 83%. That's what the typical turnout is. In the off-year election, it drops to somewhere between 50 and 55% if it's a good year. So if you can imagine, so even in the general election 2017, roughly, there's only going to be, if we're lucky, statewide, 50 to 55%. So we have basically 40,000 residents. The last time that all 4 of us were up and we had a levy up, there were 7,633 votes that were cast for the levy out of 40,000 residents. Turnout has never been good, and I think that we should continue to look for ways to get voter turnout to be better, right? And that's what should be the focus. I think the primary kind of leaves some of that stuff out, and that's why I'm supportive of it. I just think that it's a good system.
Ms. Fahey, your hand was up, then it went down. Did you?
Oh, no, I'm done.
You're just exercising. Ms. Newmaster.
On the same track of sort of putting the issue out. Number one, I don't think it's ever happened before, but it did. And if nothing else, it got put before the people twice. And the first time, there was pretty much no outside support. It was just whatever people did. And the second time around, there was more support and a mix of people that got involved and things like that. But the first time around was just plain old, who really gives a rip? And they went out there, not very many people. But it doesn't happen very often, and at least it's the process. I do think it's an important one.
Any other comments? We can do our research and maybe bring this back one more time just to see if we can see what the arguments on both sides are. Given that Mr. Mullen is, I think, given very cogent arguments on one side, so. Already? All right. If there is nothing else, boy, we have 10 minutes before I would have had to call the special motion to extend the meeting beyond the 9:30 automatic adjournment time, but we made it. So I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
I second that. We are adjourned. Please grab apples, bananas, or bars on your way out.